Chapter 453. Nye Tian couldn't help but frown as he exclaimed in a low voice, "So comfortable." The sudden, comfortable feeling made Nye Tian's eyebrows furrow. "What is this place? It's too magical." Nye Tian stared at the scene in front of him in shock. In front of him was a majestic square platform. The platform was hundreds of meters high, and there were steps on all four sides. Moreover, each step was very high, at least 2 to 3 meters high. Looking closely, on each step, there were 2 black dragons that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as if they were about to fight. What was even more strange was that the entire platform was shrouded by a colorful cyclone. It was like a ripple of water that enveloped the heaven and earth. The 4 steps were huge, but the platform in the center was very small. From afar, it was only a few dozen meters wide. Nye Tian could see that in the center of the Tao platform was a stone pillar that was 5 or 6 meters thick and carved with dragons. Above the pillar was a dazzling, glowing sphere that looked like a miniature sun. The multicolored vortex that enveloped the entire Tao platform was none other than the glowing sphere. Nye Tian suppressed the shock in his heart and took a deep breath. He immediately felt refreshed. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth in this place was so abundant that even the spell formation couldn't compare to it. 1 day of cultivation in this place was equal to half a month of cultivation in the outside world. After a while, everyone else entered. Other than Nye Tian, there was also a spiritual array master like Yao Feiku. A mere restriction obviously could not stop them. What is this place? What is this huge platform for? Was it used by the ancients to worship the heavens? I don't know. These steps are too big. Could it be that someone was 20 meters tall and stepped on 2 to 3 meter steps to get to the platform? That ball of light is so dazzling. It must be something good. I want it. Everyone discussed, and finally, their eyes were fixed on the ball of light above the platform. At this moment, the huge Tao platform suddenly rumbled and violently shook. Following that, the multicolored cyclone in the space above the Tao platform emitted rays of light, forming a huge spherical space around it. The spherical space enveloped everyone. Everyone looked up as if they were under a huge water curtain. Everyone was stunned, not knowing what was happening. Nye Tian's expression suddenly changed. 2 words appeared in his mind. Heaven and earth rules. That's right. He could clearly sense that the spherical water screen in front of him was condensed from the laws of heaven and earth. That kind of vast and majestic power actually made him feel like he had returned to the peak of Heavenly Emperor. The others also sensed the power within the water screen, but they were still puzzled. Among everyone present, only Nye Tian was once a Heavenly Emperor, and he was the only one who could see that the water screen in front of him was condensed from the laws of heaven and earth. At that moment, rainbow-colored ripples of light appeared in the water curtain above their heads. They suddenly began to circulate, and strange ripples filled the entire water curtain space. Everyone felt an endless power surging into their bodies, giving off an ancient and mysterious aura. Nye Tian carefully sensed the power circulating in his body, but his expression changed at this moment. He felt the coldest killing intent filling his body, and the domain origin formation in the raw star stone began to operate crazily, as if it had smelled some terrifying aura. "Don't absorb this energy!" Nye Tian shouted, and immediately circulated the Yuan Qi in his body, forcing the surging killing intent out of his body. Elder Yi and the others saw this and did not ask too much, and hurriedly forced out the strange energy. They had absolute trust in Nye Tian's words. Among the surrounding people, Tang 13, Aoki Lily, Zhang Xiaoi, and those who were familiar with Nye Tian also did the same. Rui Qianyu was also in the crowd. She glanced at Nye Tian, and also forced out the strange energy in her body. Nye Tian only then realized that even the deputy city lord of Chaos City, Wan Qirong, had come to the Chaos Abyss. Not only did the others not respond to Nye Tian's shouts, but they were also looking at him with strange expressions, as if they were looking at an idiot. The energy released from the water curtain made their blood boil, and there were even signs of a breakthrough. This kind of energy, of course, had to be absorbed crazily, and the more they absorbed, the better. Nye Tian did not care about the others. In any case, he had already warned them, and if they did not believe him, it was their own business. Bang! At this time, there was a sudden explosion, and blood splattered everywhere. A martial artist actually exploded because he had absorbed too much energy from the water curtain. What's going on? Why can't I control that energy? My blood is burning, I'm boiling, Bang! Following that, someone began to shout, and then, just like the previous person, he exploded. The most tragic cries sounded one after another, and from the crowd came a series of tragic muffled sounds. Every muffled sound represented a martial artist exploding from the energy in his body. In the blink of an eye, dozens of martial artists died. Only then did the crowd realize that Nye Tian's warning was not a joke, and they all began to force out the energy in their body. Those who died were all weak martial artists, and when the essence force in their body could not compete with the absorbed energy, their body would not be able to bear it. What the hell is this place? I want to leave! Someone shouted in panic and rushed towards the periphery of the water curtain, but when his body was just a few meters away from the water curtain shot out a rainbow-colored light blade, and that person was killed on the spot. Seeing this scene, everyone revealed a panicked expression, and some were already scared to tears. Everyone, don't panic, don't absorb the energy of the water curtain, don't go near the water curtain. Nye Tian shouted loudly. At this moment, they had to remain calm. Everyone looked at Nye Tian, and the firmness in the latter's eyes made them feel inexplicably at ease. At this time, Yao Fei walked over and said to Nye Tian City Lord, this is a forbidden killing array. Nye Tian nodded. He had already sensed that the aura on the water curtain was becoming more and more violent, and if the crowd could not maintain their calm, it was very likely to trigger the killing array's mechanism. A killing array formed by the heaven and earth laws. Nye Tian already did not know how to define the level of this killing array. The heaven and earth laws, this was a law that only heavenly emperor realm martial artists could comprehend. Mr. Yao, can you see where the array core of the killing array is? Nye Tian asked. Yao Fei Ku was after all the third spiritual array grandmaster on the spiritual array grandmaster board. If even he could not find the array core, then everyone could only wait for death. There. Yao Fei Ku looked at the stone pillar in the center of the Dao platform. It's that light ball. Nye Tian was slightly stunned, and then said, the array creator's attainments in array formations are unfathomable. Would he set the array core in the most obvious place? The light ball at the highest point of the Dao platform was the most eye-catching place in the entire killing array. And the array core was usually hidden in the most inconspicuous place. After all, the array core was the core of the array and also the weakest place. Chapter 454. Yao Fei stared at the ball of light, his expression becoming even more resolute. Large beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as he said in a low voice, because the person who laid this array knows that no one can approach the eye of the array. No one can approach the eye of the array? Nye Tian was slightly surprised, not understanding. Carefully sensed the steps around the platform. Yao Fei stared at the steps carved with a black dragon, a strange light flashing in his eyes. Nye Tian frowned slightly, spreading out his divine sense, carefully sensing every step. These steps seemed to hide some kind of true martial intent, and with every step, the true martial intent becomes stronger. At this time, a figure appeared beside Nye Tian, a gentle voice sounding out. Even at this moment of life and death, this person was still calm and indifferent. Nye Tian was slightly surprised, looking at the face that suddenly appeared beside him. This was a young man around 20 years old. His aura was completely restrained, exuding a calm and composed temperament. And his face was too good-looking, even more handsome than a woman's. This man could no longer be described as handsome, He was stunning. "Let me introduce myself, I am Gu Qiulong." The newcomer faintly smiled, extremely alluring. His voice was also excessively gentle, almost sounding like a sissy. Gu Qiulong? Hearing this name, Nie Tian couldn't help but be surprised. Could this be one of the top 3 monstrous geniuses of Su Mi Ling City? Yes. Gu Qiulong could see through Nie Tian's thoughts, smiling. "I am the person you are thinking of. And I also know who you are." Nie Tian nodded slightly, evidently not expecting that the Gu family would actually send a monstrous genius like Gu Qiulong to the chaotic abyss. The chaotic abyss was filled with dangers everywhere. The other major forces would only send geniuses that weren't at the peak. After all, the possibility of dying here was very high. Gu Qiulong appearing in the chaotic abyss was indeed surprising. At this time, everyone had no time to be surprised by Gu Qiulong's identity, waiting for Yao Fik and the others to continue. Nie Tian's first impression of Gu Qiulong wasn't bad. Although this person was excessively beautiful, he didn't have the arrogance of other monstrous geniuses, so he said, "You are right, there is a great power hidden above these steps, and the source of this power is the eye ball above the Tao platform." Nie Tian had already determined that the light ball above the Tao platform was the eye of the killing array. Yao Fik nodded and said, "This Tao platform seems to be able to test a martial artist's talent. The true martial intent on it has a different level of pressure on every martial artist. The stronger the martial artist, the greater the pressure." Nie Tian also vaguely sensed this, and said, "These steps are divided into 10 levels, and each level has 9 steps. I reckon that each level represents a martial artist realm, and each step represents a small realm. There are 10 steps. The first 9 steps represent the 9 great realms of a martial artist: Origin Meridian Realm, Origin Spirit Realm, Manifestation Realm, Giant Spirit Realm, True Energy Realm, Divine Wheel Realm, Heaven Evolution Realm, Heaven Man Realm, and Heavenly Emperor Realm. What does the 10th floor represent?" As Gu Qiulong spoke, his expression changed slightly. "Divine State." Yao Fei Ku and Nie Tian blurted out almost at the same time. Their faces were equally embarrassed. The 10 steps tested a warrior's talent, and the 10th step represented the legendary divine realm. This undoubtedly indicated that only martial artists that had a chance of advancing to the godly realm were able to step foot onto the 10th step. The divine realm was a realm that only existed in legends. In these 3,000 small worlds, how could there be a martial artist who could advance to the god realm? No wonder the person who set up the formation had placed the formation core in the most conspicuous place of the killing formation. It was because he knew that no one could reach the 10th step. If they couldn't even reach the 10th step, how could they break through the formation core? "I don't care. I want to get out of here." At this moment, one of the cultivators suddenly shouted and sent a palm strike towards the water screen in the sky. A palm shadow flew out, but when it struck the water screen, there was no movement at all. It was as though it had been directly absorbed. Bang! The martial artist was stunned for a moment. In the next moment, a palm shadow suddenly slammed down from the water screen, directly turning the martial artist into meat paste. The water screen actually absorbed the martial artist's attack and reflected it back. This guy was slapped to death by his own palm. It was too strange. Everyone was stunned on the spot, and no one dared to make a move. "Rising Dragon Platform, open!" Suddenly, a rumbling voice fell. It was boundless, and no one could pinpoint the source of the voice. However, it clearly resounded in everyone's ears. "Rising Dragon Platform." Nie Tian's expression was tense. So this Tao platform was called Rising Dragon Platform, which should have the meaning of a carp leaping over the dragon's gate. It indicated that those who could step onto the highest platform were dragons among men. Boom! At this moment, a strange change occurred on the first step of the Rising Dragon Platform. The black dragons carved on it came to life, turning into black flames and surging into the water screen above everyone's heads. black flame dragons surged in the water screen, and shrill roars rang in everyone's ears. Rising dragon slaying matrix, open! The rumbling voice sounded again. Then, the black dragon statues on the second step slowly came to life and surged into the water screen. Nie Tian immediately understood. If all the black dragon statues on the 10th step rushed into the water screen, it would be the end of everyone here. CK your grandma. I want to see what's so strange about this rising dragon platform. At this moment, a figure suddenly rose from the ground and rushed toward the rising dragon platform. This person flew into the air, intending to cross all the steps and fly toward the matrix eye sphere on the rising dragon platform. Whoosh! Just as he approached the rising dragon platform, a murderous aura suddenly flew out, and before he could react, he was sent flying backward. His body was like a kite with a broken string, and blood splattered in the air. When he landed on the ground, he died on the spot. Everyone looked at the corpse and sucked in a breath of cold air. This person was in the true elemental force first realm, but he died just like that. The crowd's faces turned solemn. It seemed that in order to step onto the rising dragon platform, one had to climb the steps step by step. Let me do it. Just then, another figure flew up. This person was much smarter, and he came to the edge of the rising dragon platform and stepped onto the steps. Qiu Lin. Seeing this figure, Gu Qiulong's expression changed, and he exclaimed. The person who stepped onto the rising dragon platform was his younger brother, Gu Qiulin. Don't worry, he's ascending the rising dragon platform. He should be safe. Nie Tian looked at Gu Qiulin and said calmly. Nie Tian had fought with Gu Qiulin before. The latter was in the Giant Soul Stage 9th realm, and he was ranked 21st on the genius list of Su Mi Ling City. Nie Tian did not know which level he could reach. Everyone's eyes were on Gu Qiulin, who easily reached the 6th step. But after that, every step on the 6th step was extremely difficult for Gu Qiulin. The 6th step represents the spirit wheel stage. This should be the limit of Gu Qiulin's talent. Nie Tian looked at Gu Qiulin and nodded. Chapter 455. Boom! In that instant Gu Qiulin felt a tremendous force. It was boundless, as if it had appeared out of thin air. It gave him a feeling that he could not resist it at all. Boom! With a muffled sound, Gu Qiulin was bounced off the platform. After landing, he stood firmly and stared at the rising dragon platform with a pale face, his eyes filled with unwillingness. The force was too terrifying and unstoppable. Even his soul was trembling. He's Gu Qiulin, one of the geniuses of Su Mi Ling capital, but he only reached the 6th level. Is this rising dragon platform really that terrifying? Someone in the crowd recognized Gu Qiulin and exclaimed. Gu Qiulin was a genius from Su Mi Ling capital, but he was stopped at the 6th level. This was unacceptable to many. Qiu Lin, are you all right? Gu Qiulong hurried over and asked anxiously when he saw Gu Qiulin's pale face, as if he had just gone through a great battle. Gu Qiulin smiled bitterly. Big brother, that force is too terrifying. I can't stop it. You must be careful if you want to go up. Rest. Gu Qiulong nodded and looked at the rising dragon platform with a solemn expression. Let me do it. I don't believe that this stupid platform is that powerful. At this moment, a voice rang out. A small figure leaped up and stepped onto the rising dragon platform. The crowd was stunned when they saw the figure on the platform. It was a 12 or 13-year-old kid. It's him. Nie Tian was slightly taken aback when he saw the young face. He was very familiar with this face. It was the one he fought at the Dragon Blood Martial Gathering, Qing Xian. Qing Xian was from one of the 7 top trading groups of the Martial Gathering. He was also the 9th genius on the West Peak region's genius ranking. Despite his young age, he was already at the 6th level of the Giant Spirit Realm. Qing Xian was one of the Martial Gatherings teams. Aoki Lily was also among them. This little fellow's talent is indeed not bad. After not seeing him for such a short period of time, his strength has actually risen by another level. Nie Tian looked at Qing Xian and could not help but reveal an expression of praise. Although Qing Xian's strength was inferior to Gu Qilin's, his talent was undoubtedly above the latter because he was too young, only 12 years old. Brother Xian, be careful. Qing Xian's older sister, Qing Xian'er, was also present. When she saw her younger brother step onto the rising dragon platform, she couldn't help but shout. Elder sister, don't worry. I, Brother Xian, do not care about this *T flight of stairs. Qing Xian smiled confidently. Immediately, his figure became like a little rabbit as he swiftly leapt up. In the blink of an eye, Qing Xian's figure arrived at the 6th step. Look, that kid went up to the 6th floor. Just now, Gu Qilin was blasted down from the 6th floor. I don't know if that kid can still go down, someone exclaimed. It should be possible, Nie Tian murmured, as if he was answering that person, but also talking to himself. He estimated that with Qing Xian's talent, he should be able to reach the 8th level, and even the 9th level. The rising dragon platform tested a martial artist's talent, not their strength. Qing Xian was only 12 years old, and he had already reached the 6th layer of the giant spirit realm. This talent was absolutely astonishing, and not inferior to the 3 monsters of Sumi Ling City. Sure enough, Qing Xian's figure flickered a few more times, and he easily passed through the 6th and 7th levels, directly arriving at the 8th level. Damn! He actually reached the 8th level. What is this kid? Why is he so much stronger than Gu Qilin? Yeah, the 8th level represents the heaven tier. Could it be that this kid will become a heaven tier warrior in the future? That's absolutely impossible. Even Lord Tang Hao and Lord Mo Zhaojing are only spirit wheel realm warriors. It's impossible for this kid to become a heaven tier warrior. This rising dragon platform is probably a scam. Seeing Qing Xian step onto the 8th level, the crowd burst into discussion. How is this kid so powerful? Gu Qilin's brows were tightly knitted, and he suffered a blow. The others did not believe that Qing Xian had the potential to become a heaven-tier warrior, because the 2 pinnacles of the 3,000 small worlds were only spirit wheel realm warriors. They could not even reach the heaven evolution realm, let alone the heaven tier. However, Nie Tian shook his head slightly, and said in his heart, Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing cannot break through the heaven evolution realm, not because of their talent, but because they are in the 3,000 small worlds. The 3,000 small worlds belonged to the lower world, and above it was the middle world, Sumi world, and the upper world, the heaven realm and the god realm. In the heaven realm and the god realm, even if the martial artists were not monstrously talented, they could easily reach the spirit wheel realm. For those with amazing talent, it was very easy for them to reach the heaven realm and heavenly emperor realm. The reason for this situation was not because the martial artists in the 3,000 small worlds were less talented than the martial artists in the heaven realm and the god realm, but because of the existence of the plane restriction. The 3,000 small worlds had the plane restriction of the lower level, which meant that even the most monstrous person could only reach the peak of the spirit wheel realm. Sumi world had the plane restriction of the middle level, so the martial artists in that world could at most reach the peak of the heaven realm. The plane restriction of the heaven realm and the god realm was the upper level plane restriction, and the martial artists could reach the peak of the heavenly emperor realm, or even break through to the god realm. If Qing Xian was born in the heaven realm and the god realm, his current strength would at least be the peak of the true energy realm, or even the spirit wheel realm. A 12-year-old spirit wheel realm martial artist, this was definitely an existence that the martial artists in the 3,000 small worlds could not imagine. This information was probably only known by a few people at the peak. Only after reaching the peak of the spirit wheel realm would one be able to detect the existence of the plane restriction. Qing Xian, you have a monstrous little brother. How enviable! Seeing that Qing Xian had already stepped onto the 8th floor of the Rising Dragon platform, Qing Mu Eureka said sourly. So what if I'm envious? Anyway, it's impossible for your little brother to reach the 8th floor. Qing Xian erased her little face like a proud white swan. Fortunately, Ding Yifan was not here. If he heard Qing Xian say that about him, who knew how he would feel? Qing Xian stepped onto the 8th floor, and every step after that became very slow and difficult. Finally, on the last step of the 8th floor, he finally could not hold on and was directly bombarded by a terrifying force. After Qing Xian landed, he did not stand firm and almost fell. Fortunately, he was supported by Qing Xian. Brother Xian, are you okay? Qing Xian saw that Qing Xian's face was as pale as a sheet and asked with concern. Qing Xian shook his head stubbornly and stared at the Rising Dragon platform, as if he wanted to try again. However, at this time, another figure had already flown up. That person had only stepped onto the 5th floor, and was bombarded down. Immediately after, other martial artists stepped forward one after another, all wanting to know where the limit of their talent was. Unfortunately, most people stopped below the 6th floor, and only a very small number of people were able to step onto the 7th floor. Those who were bombarded down looked at the Rising Dragon platform unwillingly, all suspecting something. Chapter 456. Look, it's Commander Wu. The crowd couldn't help but exclaim when they saw the figure that suddenly leaped up. The person who suddenly appeared was none other than the Dan Martial Hall's commander, Wu Mang. Wu Mang was, like his name, a brute. After seeing so many people being blasted off the Rising Dragon platform, he still didn't believe in the Rising Dragon platform's power. He actually wanted to step onto the Rising Dragon stone pillar. Watch this commander destroy the Rising Dragon platform! Wu Mang roared in the air. Essence force surged out of his body as he slammed down with his palm. An enormous aura instantly erupted. Idiot! Upon seeing this, Nie Tian gave the most direct and pertinent evaluation. The Rising Dragon killing formation was a spirit formation formed by the laws of heaven and earth. How could it be broken so easily? Wu Mang's action was no different from courting death. PFFF. Under the gaze of countless eyes, Wu Mang's palm was actually absorbed by the invisible barrier outside the Rising Dragon platform. It disappeared without a trace, like a clay ox entering the sea. Wu Mang was slightly stunned and instantly flew into a rage. He actually wanted to send out a second palm strike. Unfortunately, in the next moment, there was a rumbling, whistling sound in the air. The palm strike was returned to him, and the aura was even stronger. Ah! Wu Mang didn't even have time to react before he screamed. His own palm struck his face, and his figure was smashed into the ground, creating a deep pit. His entire body was covered in blood, and he couldn't even get up. A dignified Dan Martial Hall commander was beaten down just like that. This face was really thrown back into the womb. Mo Feng, Qiu Wuheng, and the others looked at Wu Mang with shock. Now they finally believed that the Rising Dragon platform tested the aptitude of martial artists. Even if their strength far surpassed others, they might not be able to compete with these young people. Hence, it was better not to go up and embarrass themselves. Nie Tian didn't look at Wu Mang either. His eyes were fixed on the Rising Dragon platform with a solemn expression. With his talent, it was definitely no problem for him to step onto the 9th level, but the 10th level might not be the same. Moreover, there were only 3 steps on the 10th level, but each step was 5 to 6 meters tall. No one knew what it meant. At this moment, the black dragon statues on the 3rd step of the Rising Dragon platform had begun to emerge. At this rate, it would take at most half an hour for the black dragon statue on the 10th step to be activated. At that time, the black flames would fill the water curtain, and that would be the time when everyone would die. A killing formation condensed from the laws of heaven and earth. Even a heavenly Emperor realm martial artist was absolutely unable to contend against it. Let me. Right at this moment, two voices rang out at the same time. The two people who spoke exchanged glances and smiled. Soon after, they leapt forward and stepped onto the Rising Dragon stage at the same time. Look, another person is going up. Seeing another person stepping onto the Rising Dragon arena, the crowd exclaimed. Just now, most of the people had gone up, and the remaining people either didn't want to try, or they knew their limits and didn't want to embarrass themselves. Of course, there were still people who were watching and waiting to go up last, such as Nye Tian, Gu Qiulong, Rui Qianyu, and the others. The two of them should be able to go up to the 9th level. Nye Tian took a good look at the two people's faces. It was Duanmu Lu and Zhan Xiaoyi, and his lips curled into a smile. Duanmu Lu's talent in the way of the sword was the strongest person Nye Tian had ever met. Moreover, he had the Khanate 8 Extreme Sword Seal, so he should have no problem entering the 9th level. As for Zhan Xiaoyi, he had the Battle Cloud Tyrant body, an earth-ranked spiritual body of heaven and earth. If he was in the heaven realm, he could easily advance to the heavenly emperor realm. Head Duanmu, be careful. Gu Wuyo saw Duanmu Lu going up, and her face was full of worry as she reminded loudly. Don't worry. Duanmu Lu turned back and smiled confidently. Then, he looked at Zhan Xiaoyi and said loudly, Brother Zhan, please. Let's go together. Zhan Xiaoyi laughed heartily, and the two of them rushed up the Rising Dragon stage at the same time. The two of them were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they had arrived at the 8th level. Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene. One had to know that apart from Qing Xian, no one had ever set foot on the 8th level before. Looking at the two of them, it seemed that reaching the 8th level was very easy. I know, he's the young master of the Battle Cloud sect, the guy who has the Battle Cloud Tyrant body. No wonder, so he's the #1 genius of the North Sea region. No wonder he could reach the 8th level so easily. But who is the person beside Zhan Xiaoyi? I've never seen him before, and he seems to be a few years younger. I don't know, he should be a genius from the other 3 domains. Zhan Xiaoyi's reputation was obviously much higher than Duanmu Lu's. Most people only knew the former and not the latter. General Gu, your future man is going to be famous this time. Nye Tian looked at Duanmu Lu, his eyes filled with gratification. As the teacher, his disciple was famous, he was also basking in the glory. Gu Wuyo wasn't the least bit shy, instead, he had a proud expression and said, The man that I, Gu Wuyo, fancy is naturally extraordinary. Nye Tian was speechless. He seriously suspected that in the future, Duanmu Lu would be like a little sheep next to Gu Wuyo. Gu Wuyo, don't you want to try? Nye Tian looked at the heroic girl beside him and suddenly asked. I. Gu Wuyo was very hesitant, and he smiled and said, Forget it. Nye Tian frowned slightly and said in his heart, Gu Wuyo, is there really a big secret on you? Nye Tian had already discovered that ever since they entered the chaotic abyss, the great Chu state preceptor, Tawny, would look in his direction from time to time. Not only was she interested in Nye Tian, but the way she looked at Gu Wuyo was also very unusual. Nye Tian guessed that the person who left Gu Wuyo in the great Chu imperial city was Tawny. As for what exactly was on Gu Wuyo that was worth Tawny's attention, Nye Tian really couldn't guess. He couldn't sense any noteworthy aura from Gu Wuyo's body. Look, they've reached the 9th level, the crowd exclaimed. Nye Tian looked up and saw that Zhan Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu had indeed stepped onto the 9th level. The two of them had reached the 9th level, but they still had a relaxed expression on their faces. It was unknown whether it was an act or not. The two of them were friends, but they were also competitors. Neither of them would be convinced. Brother Zhan, are you all right? Duanmu Lu smiled faintly, but no matter how he tried to hide it, his expression was still a little ugly. If you don't go down, then I won't go down. Zhan Xiaoyi's determined face squeezed out a smile. It was obvious that he was already feeling the pressure. Nye Tian caught both of their reactions and murmured, These two will at most reach the last step of the 9th level. That's their limit. Right now, the pressure that Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu were enduring was definitely unimaginable to ordinary people. Every step that followed would be a huge challenge for them. To be able to reach the last step of the 9th level, that also required absolute determination. On the Rising Dragon platform, any martial technique was useless. It tested a cultivator's talent and determination. If one wanted to step onto the highest level, neither could be lacking. Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu's figures continued to rise, and they really reached the 9th step of the 9th level. One more step and the two of them would be able to step onto the 10th level. Brother Zhan, this is my limit, but I still want to try one more time. The corners of Duanmu Lu's mouth curled up in a bitter smile. His face was already as pale as a sheet, and it was as if all the essence energy in his body had been sucked out. He didn't have the slightest bit of strength left in his body. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible for him to step onto the 5 to 6 meter high step. Chapter 457. My God! They walked to the peak of the 9th level. Doesn't that mean that both of them have the potential to advance to peak 9th level Heavenly Emperor? This is also too terrifying, right? Biological father. They don't plan on giving up. Could it be that they still want to go up to the 10th level? These two fellows are too terrifying. F***ck. Why can't I even go up to the 6th level? I want to cry. When the crowd saw that Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu did not plan on stopping, they exclaimed one after another. Most of the people here had just been bombarded down by the Rising Dragon platform's power. At this moment, they no longer doubted the Rising Dragon platform's power. That kind of formless, boundless, and irresistible power was truly terrifying. For two people to be able to step onto the 9th level, it was truly astounding. Without a doubt, if this group of people could leave the chaos abyss alive today, Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu's names would spread throughout the entire Trichiliocosm rapidly. Silly blockhead. Quickly come down. Gu Wuyo could not help shouting when he saw that Duanmu Lu still wanted to try, with an anxious look. It's fine. As long as they follow the Rising Dragon platform's rules, the Rising Dragon platform won't harm them. Nie Tian looked at the two figures on the Rising Dragon platform, his expression becoming solemn. Yao Fik and Gu Qiulong and the rest were all stunned for a moment. They did not expect that someone could really step onto the 9th level's final step. The two people were both spirit formation masters. Furthermore, their mental strength was astonishing. The array formation Dao intent circulating on the Rising Dragon platform was absolutely no joke. Brother Zhan, let's go! Duanmu Lu roared angrily and leaped with all his might. His figure rose several meters into the air. Just as he was about to touch the 10th step, he suddenly felt an overwhelming force pressing down on him from all directions. He was completely unable to resist it. Arg! Duanmu Lu cried out tragically. The instant his figure was about to fall, a hand grabbed him. It was precisely Zhang Xiaoyi. Zhang Xiaoyi forcefully pulled Duanmu Lu up and said with a bitter smile, Brother Duanmu, are you all right? I'm fine. Duanmu Lu's complexion was pale, blood spilling out of the corners of his mouth. But the determination in his eyes did not diminish in the slightest as he said, Brother Zhan, come and try. Yes. Zhang Xiaoyi nodded and stomped hard on the ground. Her body rose from the ground, but the result was the same as Duanmu Lu. She was also blasted down at the edge of the 10th level. This time, it was Duanmu Lu's turn to pull Zhang Xiaoyi back. What had happened on the Rising Dragon platform astonished everyone. Both of them were so strong that they could remain so determined under such circumstances. They must have great willpower. If you want to succeed, you need friends. If you want great success, you need opponents. Duanmu Lu and Zhang Xiaoyi are both friends and opponent. Perhaps they'll be able to make it to the 10th level. Nie Tian's eyes grew fierce as he looked at the unyielding figures on the Rising Dragon arena. Following that, the two figures on the rising dragon platform kept trying, failing, and being pulled back again and again. The martial artists below the platform were dumbfounded. They did not dare to imagine how strong Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu's willpower must be. Everyone knew that when one reached one's limit on the rising dragon platform, the pressure was overwhelming. It was a power that made one despair and unable to resist. Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu did not give up even after so many failures. Their willpower far exceeded that of ordinary people. Mr. Nye, your disciple, and that kid from the Zhan family are not simple. Elder Yi was a tough person. Seeing the scene on the rising dragon platform, he couldn't help but be respectful. The path of martial arts is meant to defy the heavens. Those who can stand at the peak are all people with indomitable will. Both of them have reached their limits, but they still do not give up. I believe that their willpower will allow them to break through their limits, Nye Tian said solemnly, his voice cold and calm. Brother Zhan, let's do it together. On the rising dragon platform, both of them were already covered in blood. Duanmu Lu looked at Zhang Xiaoyi with determination. All right, Zhang Xiaoyi roared. Then, both figures leaped up at the same time. Just as they were about to step onto the 10th step, both of them took the initiative to retreat. Nye Tian was taken aback. He quickly understood that both of them wanted to push the other up to the 10th step. Unfortunately, both of them retreated at the same time, causing them to move further and further away from the 10th step. Both of them understood each other's intentions. Smiling at each other, they no longer had any regrets and prepared to be thrown off the rising dragon platform. The crowd's eyes were filled with regret. Between Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu, one of them could have reached the 10th step. However, due to mutual modesty, both of them lost the opportunity. Reaching the 10th step not only meant that one was talented, but it also meant that one could get close to the rising dragon pillar and have a chance to destroy the orb. As long as the orb was destroyed, the rising dragon killing formation would be broken and everyone would survive. What a pity such a great opportunity was missed just like that. However, just as everyone thought that Zhang Xiaoyi was about to be thrown off the platform, something strange happened. Roar! A powerful and surging dragon roar sounded. Soon after, a dragon figure surged out from the rising dragon's stone pillar. It suddenly shook and a strange energy appeared. It actually forcefully dragged Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu back to the 10th level. The two of them stood on the 10th step, looking at each other, not knowing what had happened. Those with great perseverance trigger the sigh of the rising dragon. The next moment, the rumbling voice rang out again. The sigh of the rising dragon. Everyone was stunned. They did not understand what it meant. However, thinking back to that dragon roar, it did sound like a sigh. Nye Tian shook his head slightly. He guessed that the so-called sigh of the rising dragon was a form of encouragement for those with great perseverance. It looked like this rising dragon platform was interesting. Not only was it a killing formation, it was also very humane and knew how to encourage others. Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu looked at each other, then at the 10th step in front of them. They smiled at each other and did not force it, jumping off the rising dragon platform. To be able to trigger the sigh of the rising dragon, it was enough to show Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu's perseverance. Looks like the legendary godly state does exist. The corners of Nye Tian's lips curled up, his eyes filled with desire. With Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu as examples, there were others who tried to climb the rising dragon platform at the same time. But without exception, all of them failed. It was already difficult to find two cultivators with similar talents, and it was almost impossible to ask these two cultivators to be people who would not give up. Among them, the more outstanding ones were Gu Qiulong and Qiu Shaofeng. However, the two of them could only reach the middle of the 9th step before they could no longer hold on and were blasted down. Aokiki Lily and Qing Xian also reached the 9th step, but they also died. Gu Wuyo, are you interested? Are you waiting for a suitable partner? Nie Tian noticed Gu Wuyo's gaze on the rising dragon platform and could not help but smile. If there's someone worthy of being my partner, I don't mind giving it a try. The corners of Gu Wuyo's lips curled up, looking very confident. At this moment, a beautiful figure appeared in front of the rising dragon platform. Gu Wuyo, your good partner has appeared. Nie Tian saw the figure and nodded slightly with a smile. That's her. Gu Wuyo agreed. He leaped up and stood shoulder to shoulder with Raindrop Qianye. They exchanged a glance, and although they didn't say anything, they understood each other's intentions. Chapter 458. The Rising Dragon's sigh made Nie Tian understand that the Rising Dragon platform was not only a killing formation, but also a mysterious spiritual formation that hid the ultimate martial truth. It's two women. Everyone was shocked and exclaimed in a low voice. They did not expect that there would be two women challenging the Rising Dragon platform at this time. Rui Qianyu, Vice City Lord Wan Qirong, looked at her new disciple and frowned. She smiled and thought to herself, you have the 9-color pupils. Can you make it to the 10th level? Wan Qirong's eyes were a little complicated. There was a little worry and a little desire. Gu Wuyo. On the other side, when Great Chu's imperial tutor Hu Shaoli saw Gu Wuyo's figure appear, a trace of palpitation flashed through her beautiful eyes. Her heart was indescribably excited. Gu Wuyo, the thing that my dear sister left on your body should have matured by now. Tawny's delicate face was hidden under the veil, but her aura was perfectly captured by Nie Tian. As expected, State Preceptor, you have ulterior motives for Gu Wuyo. Nie Tian glanced at Tawny and sneered in his heart, but he did not show it on his face. No matter what Tawny wanted from Gu Wuyo, Nie Tian would not let her get what she wanted. However, the most important thing now was to see how far Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo could go on the Rising Dragon platform. Nie Tian estimated that with Rui Qianyu's talent, she could at least make it to the 9th level. As for whether she could make it to the 10th level, it would depend on her determination. As for Gu Wuyo, although her talent was not as good as Rui Qianyu's, even Nie Tian did not know what kind of secret she was hiding. These two women had great hatred in their hearts, but their personalities were completely different. One was cold as ice and the other was passionate. How far could they go? Just when the crowd was feeling puzzled, two devastatingly beautiful figures had already easily arrived at the 6th level. He has reached the Spirit Wheel stage. The 6th level represented the Spirit Wheel stage. The crowd exclaimed in a low voice. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo didn't look at each other and rushed to the higher floors. Their speed was extremely fast. After a few flashes, they arrived at the 9th floor. The 9th level represented the Heavenly Emperor realm. The martial artists present that could reach this realm could be counted on one hand. At this moment, the crowd became much more nervous. Most people did not expect that these two seemingly unremarkable and unknown women would be able to step onto the 9th level so easily. One had to know that even Gu Qiulong, who was known as one of the 3 monstrous geniuses of Sumeru's spirit capital, had only reached the 9th floor. Stepping onto the 9th floor, Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo finally looked at each other, and then rushed again. After a few leaps, they arrived at the last step of the 9th floor. They were only one step away from stepping onto the 10th step, the legendary God realm. They are almost at the 10th floor. The crowd was boiling with excitement as they looked at the two beautiful figures on the Rising Dragon platform. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo raised their heads at the same time and looked at the high platform in front of them with steely eyes. There was no hint of fear in their eyes, but they were unusually determined. The two nodded heavily and actually leaped up at the same time. The two figures stepped onto the 10th floor like a dream. Their bodies swayed slightly and immediately they stood firm. Roar. At this moment, the Rising Dragon sigh sounded again, but there was no dragon shadow because the two of them no longer needed the dragon shadow's help. The two figures stood firmly on the first step of the first floor. Their backs were devastatingly beautiful, but they had the grandeur of a towering mountain. At this moment, the crowd felt as if they were hallucinating. It was as if the figures on the rising dragon platform were not humans, but two majestic gods. That kind of figure made people feel awe, and even their souls could not help but tremble. Master Wuyo, she has reached the 10th floor. Duanmu Lu blurted out in a daze. Nye Tian was also shocked. After a while, he nodded with a smile and said, "Brat, you have picked up a treasure this time." Nye Tian did not expect that Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo could easily step onto the 10th floor, because he had always thought that it would not be so easy to reach the legendary immortal state. It seems that the divine realm is not as difficult as I thought. The martial artists must have made a mistake. Or maybe I'm exaggerating the difficulty of the god realm. Nye Tian thought to himself. His desire and confidence to reach the god realm rose once again. There were only 3 steps on the 10th floor, but the height of the 3 steps was 5 to 6 meters. He wondered what it meant. There were only 3 steps on the 10th floor, but the height of the 3 steps was 5 to 6 meters. He wondered what it meant. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, the 2 figures leaped up again. When they landed, they actually stood firmly on the 2nd step of the 10th floor. Another step. The crowd was on the verge of exploding. They could even feel their souls trembling. Who are these 2 girls? They are even more powerful than Gu Qiulong and Zhan Xiaoyi with the Warclued tyrant body. The 10th floor represents the legendary immortal state. Their potential is too terrifying. Spirit Formation Master Yao Fik looked at the 2 figures, the muscles on his face and the voice in his throat trembling. He was a Spirit Formation Master, and no one present knew better than him how terrifying the rising dragon platform was. It was hard to imagine that someone could step onto the 10th floor so easily. The older martial artists present were all shocked. Even Yi Linyun, the madman, had a burning look on his face. Wu Meng's failure made them realize that they should not go up and embarrass themselves at their age. Moreover, everyone could see that the rising dragon platform tested one's talent. Those with different cultivation levels would definitely experience different pressures. Moreover, those who had gone up the rising dragon platform, no matter what the result was, would all have a pale face, as if their origin energy had been depleted. Elder Yi did not go up the rising dragon platform because he was concerned about the safety of Nye Tian and the others. If his strength was depleted by the rising dragon platform, there was no guarantee that Diao Zhengde, Mo Feng, and the others would not attack Nye Tian. At this moment, the black dragon carvings on the steps of the rising dragon platform were still surging into the water curtain, turning into black flames and glaring at the crowd. This was a clock of life and death. With every step they took, they were 1 step closer to death. When all the black dragon carvings were activated, the rising dragon killing formation would be fully activated. Even a heavenly emperor would die in the formation formed by the laws of heaven and earth. At this moment, on the rising dragon platform, Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo's figures moved again. As long as they took 1 more step, they would be able to step onto the rising dragon platform. At the same time, they would be closer to the rising dragon stone pillars, and they would have a chance to destroy the formation ice sphere. Go! They shouted in unison, and the 2 figures leaped up. At this instant, 2 rays of white light suddenly surged out from the rising dragon stone pillars and surged toward the 2. 2 pairs of beautiful eyes flickered slightly, and the 2 rays of white light swept past their bodies, as if it was some kind of final test. Chapter 459. Hold it right there. Countless pairs of eyes were instantly stunned. The scene froze in that instant, and everyone's expressions were collectively petrified. At that moment, the 2 ladies were like kings standing at the top of the heavens. It was as if the entire space was lit up because of them. Boom! Suddenly, the rising dragon arena shook. Unparalleled king, trigger the rage of the rising dragon. The booming voice sounded again. Following that, the stone pillars with dragon carvings on the rising dragon ring began to move. The rage of the rising dragon. As the booming voice sounded, the stone pillars in the center of the rising dragon ring began to move as if they had come alive. Boom! Boom! The next moment, two colorful cyclones appeared from the 100-meter-tall stone pillars and attacked Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo. The two of them snapped out of their daze and looked at each other. Suddenly, they realized that their yuan qi that had been drained had returned. It was extremely strange. The two of them moved at the same time and stood back to back, dodging the two cyclones. The next moment, the two colorful cyclones hovered in the air and expanded abruptly. Following that, something even stranger happened. Two giant dragon heads appeared from the expanding cyclones. The dragon eyes, dragon whiskers, dragon horns, and dragon scales were vivid as if they were alive. The crowd was shocked when they saw the scene on the rising dragon ring. That was a real mystical dragon. The dragon energy surged through the entire rising dragon killing formation. Everyone felt a shiver that came from the depths of their souls. The rage of the rising dragon. Nie Tian's expression was extremely ugly. He suddenly realized that other than testing a martial artist's talent and determination, the last floor of the rising dragon ring also tested a martial artist's combat strength. Only by defeating the divine dragon that manifested on the rising dragon stone pillars would one truly be acknowledged by the rising dragon platform. Roar! On the rising dragon platform, the two dragons let out furious roars at the same time. Their complete bodies were finally revealed. They were 100 meters long and emitted a strong murderous intent. Their eyes were like the sun and the moon, staring at Raindrop Qianye and Gu Wuyo. Master, will Worryless be all right? Duanmu Lu's heart leaped to his throat when he saw this scene, and he asked with a worried expression. However, as soon as he turned around, he discovered that Nie Tian's figure had disappeared. Nie Tian took a step forward and arrived before the rising dragon platform. Looking up at the 100-meter-tall steps, he growled, "I'd like to see just how strong the rising dragon's fury is." At the same time, another shadow appeared. It was Tang 13. The two exchanged a glance, but they did not speak. They only smiled at each other before their figures flashed and they flew towards the rising dragon stage. Look! Someone else was going to the rising dragon arena. And there were two of them. It's Heaven Luo City Governor Nie Tian. And the 13th young master of the Tang family. The 13th young master of the Tang family? Isn't that guy a good-for-nothing? Cripple your sister. The Tang clan's elder is right here. Are you King tired of living? The crowd exclaimed. Their eyes darted between the two dragons on the rising dragon platform and the two figures who were running wildly below. As Tang Yuyu was in seclusion, she did not appear in the chaos abyss. Tang 13 did not want her to appear either. After all, it was too dangerous here. Moreover, Tang 13 knew that Tang Yuyu was brought out of the chaos abyss by her father, Tang Duan. Therefore, she did not want Tang Yuyu to return to the chaos abyss. On the rising dragon platform, the two dragons roared angrily. Their terrifying dragon energy was terrifying to the extreme. Their giant bodies tumbled in the air, as if they were about to shatter this part of the world. Thousand Leaves Whirlwind. Rui Qianyu's eyes flashed with anger. She struck out with her palm and several green leaves turned into wind blades that attacked the divine dragon. Bang! A muffled sound could be heard. It was as if her attack had only tickled the divine dragon. The latter did not react at all. Smack! At the same time, Gu Wuyo attacked with her scarlet firmament Feihong whip. However, she was met with the same awkward situation. The divine dragon almost ignored her attack. The two divine dragons roared as their dragon energy condensed into an endless amount of pressure. The two of them could hardly breathe. Swoosh! The divine dragon's front claws came crashing down like they were made of steel. The space around them tightened. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo had nowhere to hide. The aftershock of the dragon's claws hit them, and several bloody wounds appeared on their bodies. Blood flowed continuously and dyed their bodies red. With just a single claw attack, the two of them were already unable to withstand it. At that moment, Nie Tian and Tang 13 arrived at the 9th floor in the blink of an eye. However, the crowd's attention was on the battle on the Rising Dragon platform. Not many people noticed that Nie Tian and Tang 13 had arrived at the 9th floor. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo were fighting against the two divine dragons. The two of them were completely suppressed and could not fight back. Faster! Nie Tian saw that the two of them were in danger. His expression darkened and he increased his speed again. On the 9th floor, Nie Tian did not feel much pressure. Tang 13 was the same. Tang Hao had identified him as the Tang family's most powerful ghost eye prodigy in 100 years. His talent was undeniably terrifying. Just as the two of them were madly rushing up the stairs, another figure appeared below the Rising Dragon platform. The person wore a faceless mask and concealed his aura. When he first appeared, he did not attract much attention. In the blink of an eye, the figure appeared on the stairs of the 9th floor of the Rising Dragon platform. Only then did Nie Tian realize that there was another person behind him. Tang 13 was also shocked. She stared at the faceless person in front of her, speechless. The person's speed on the Rising Dragon platform was no slower than Nie Tian and Tang 13. "Look, there's another person," the crowd exclaimed when they noticed the faceless person. "Damn it! Where did all these freakishly talented people come from?" Gu Qiulong looked at the figures on the Rising Dragon platform. He was depressed. No matter what, he was one of the 3 most talented geniuses of Mount Meru Spirit City. Even after expending tremendous effort, he had only managed to reach the 9th floor. However, Nie Tian and the others had reached the 9th floor with ease. And Tang 13, one of the top 3 geniuses in Sumi Ling City, was also able to reach the 9th floor. This made Gu Qiulong very uncomfortable. Mo Feng, Qiu Wuheng, and the others were equally embarrassed, especially when they saw Nie Tian and Tang 13 appear on the 9th floor. Nie Tian was on their list of people they must kill, and Tang 13 was a member of the Tang family. Even though the 4 aristocratic families were closely related, they were also competitors. The appearance of a super genius in the Tang family was undoubtedly a potential threat to the Mo and Qiu families. Ah! Just then, cries of agony came from the Rising Dragon platform. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo were thrown out by the giant dragon's attack. Blood sprayed out of their mouth. The two fell from the sky, covered in blood. Their faces were as white as paper. It was obvious that they could not hold on much longer. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo exchanged a look. Their eyes were filled with determination. The next second, Rui Qianyu's pupils changed. Strange vibrations emitted from her eyes. Oh no! Nie Tian's heart sank. Rui Qianyu was about to use her rainbow pupils. Then, Gu Wuyo's petite body shook. A shadow of a crimson fox appeared behind her. A terrifying aura filled the entire Rising Dragon platform. Chapter 460. What a terrifying aura! Nie Tian's face darkened as he sensed the chilling aura emanating from the Rising Dragon platform. Behind Gu Wuyo, the phantom of a demonic fox with a strange red glow slowly became more lifelike, and the entire Rising Dragon arena was dyed a fiery red. Suddenly, a scorching aura spread out, and the surrounding air became misty, instantly turning into a huge furnace. This scorching aura was exceptionally ferocious, causing the 2 mystical dragons to feel threatened. Their scales felt like they were about to explode, and they couldn't help but retreat. Their huge eyes stared at Gu Wuyo with deep wariness. Damn! What's that behind him? It looks like a fox. The crowd was shocked when they saw the demonic fox behind Gu Wuyo. Even in the Rising Dragon formation, the powerful aura of the demonic fox was unstoppable. Everyone felt their chests heat up and beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. At that moment, Nie Tian's expression froze and he could not react for a long time. Nie Tian, are you alright? Tang 13 asked when she saw the strange look in Nie Tian's eyes. It was not wise to be spacing out when one was about to break through to the 10th level of the immortal state. Nie Tian came to his senses and a name popped up in his mind: Red Lotus Demon Lord. Master! Corpse Demon Lord's voice rang out at that moment, filled with shock. She's the descendant of Red Lotus. The Red Lotus that Corpse Demon Lord mentioned and the Red Lotus Demon Lord that Nie Tian mentioned were the same person. Red Lotus Demon Lord, one of the 9 demon lords under the command of the Demon King of the Abyss, Wu Xiaotian. Red Lotus Demon Lord, the ruler of the Red Lotus country. In the demon world, he was second only to the Demon King of the Abyss. In his previous life, the person that Nie Tian was most afraid of in the demon world was undoubtedly the Demon King of the Abyss, and the person that he was second to was the Red Lotus Demon Lord. The Red Lotus Demon Monarch was the only female among the 9 great demon monarchs. However, her strength was much stronger than the other 8 great demon monarchs. Even the Corpse Demon Monarch had to admit defeat. The Red Lotus Devil Monarch had fused with the divine soul of the Red Lotus Demon Fox, one of the 9 supreme devil beasts of the 9 underworlds, to create the Scarlet Soul Red Lotus Origin Spirit. This was one of the few origin spirits that were born after birth, and it was equivalent to a second origin spirit. The Scarlet Spirit Red Lotus was regarded as the national soul of the Red Lotus country. It was equivalent to the mark of the Red Lotus ruler. Whenever the Red Lotus ruler was alive, the Scarlet Spirit Red Lotus mark would be planted in the body of the next Red Lotus ruler. That way, when the Red Lotus ruler died, the Scarlet Spirit Red Lotus in his body would automatically be transferred to the next Red Lotus ruler. The demonic fox that appeared behind Gu Wuyo was the legendary Red Lotus country's national soul, the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. Nie Tian couldn't figure out why the Scarlet Soul Red Lotus was on Gu Wuyo's body. Could it be that she, like Tang Yuyu, was also a member of the Devil Clan? The hole in his brain was a little too big. Nie Tian couldn't react for a moment. However, he finally understood why Tawny was so interested in Gu Wuyo. Nie Tian didn't think too much about it. He quickly focused his attention on climbing the Rising Dragon platform. If he couldn't even make it to the 10th floor of the Rising Dragon platform, he would be in trouble. The Crimson Soul Red Lotus. It's finally here. Below the Rising Dragon platform, Tawny couldn't hide her excitement. Her body trembled slightly, but she thought viciously, "My dear sister, even if you didn't give me the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, I would have gotten it for myself." At this moment, Hu Shaoli was looking at Gu Wuyo, her eyes revealing an extreme desire. The Crimson Soul Red Lotus was the national soul of the Red Lotus country. However, the national soul was in the body of a human girl. This was something that Tawny couldn't accept. "Sister, when you married Gu Fei back then, you broke the rules of the Red Lotus royal family, which forbids marriage with outsiders. I had no choice but to kill you. Now that your and Gu Fei's daughter has finally grown up, it's time for me to get the Crimson Soul Red Lotus back then." Tawny's eyes burned with greed and coldness. Gu Fei. If Gu Wuyo heard this name, she would definitely be grief-stricken. That was her father's name. Gu Wuyo would never have guessed that her mother was not human, but a member of the Red Lotus clan from the Devil World. Moreover, her identity was extraordinary. She was the ruler of the Red Lotus country. The imperial advisor of Great Chu, Tawny, was actually her aunt. Unfortunately, her aunt, Tawny, was only interested in the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. She held a great deal of resentment towards Gu Wuyo himself. From Tawny's point of view, the Crimson Soul Red Lotus should have been passed down to her. Gu Wuyo, a human with an impure bloodline, was not worthy of the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. Boom! At that moment, a strange explosion erupted from the Rising Dragon platform. The shadow of the demonic fox behind Gu Wuyo gradually solidified. Suddenly, a huge blood-red lotus slowly appeared on the demonic fox's body, and then suddenly bloomed. The blood-red lotus bloomed layer by layer. Suddenly, a boundless aura spread out, and the momentum of heaven and earth immediately changed. At that moment, Gu Wuyo was like a huge black hole that could devour everything around her. That's... The crowd trembled as they watched the scene on the rising dragon platform. They were so shocked that they couldn't speak. The red lotus bloomed, and an overwhelming killing intent spread out. Everyone felt their hearts sink, and even their souls seemed to be trembling. Crimson Soul Red Lotus. Gu Wuyo is indeed the descendant of the Red Lotus Devil Lord. Nie Tian was shocked, and his expression was one of astonishment. He was very sure that the lotus bloomed on Gu Wuyo was the soul of the Red Lotus country, the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. He also knew that the Crimson Soul Red Lotus could only be inherited by those with the royal bloodline of the Red Lotus country. This was because the first owner of the Crimson Soul Red Lotus was the Red Lotus Devil Lord. She had left a bloodline mark on the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, so only those with the royal bloodline could control the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. If others wanted to obtain the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, not only would it be impossible, but they would also be devoured by the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. At that moment, Nie Tian looked at Tawny and murmured to himself, "Lord Imperial Preceptor, since you're so interested in the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, it seems that you're also a member of the Red Lotus royal family. No wonder your aura is so strange." When Nie Tian first saw Tawny, he sensed that the latter's aura was different from that of an ordinary person, but he didn't think too much about it at the time. Now that he remembered it, everything was much clearer. Nie Tian had known Gu Wuyo for so long, but he had never sensed any unusual aura from her. This was very inconsistent with her identity as a member of the Red Lotus royal family. "Gu Wuyo, it seems that you have a half-human, half-demon bloodline. If my guess is correct, your mother is a member of the Red Lotus clan, and your father is a human." Nie Tian thought to himself. Gu Wuyo's bloodline contained both demon and human bloodlines. It was her human bloodline that covered up her Red Lotus bloodline. The power of her bloodline was so powerful that it was even stronger than the royal bloodline of the Red Lotus royal family. This undoubtedly meant that Gu Wuyo's father was no ordinary person. Chapter 461. The Red Lotus demonic flame condensed into a sword of flame. The surging aura caused the space to emit a strange squeezing sound. The moment the sword of flame appeared, the divine dragon actually sensed danger. Its huge eyes revealed a look of fear, and its body couldn't help but retreat. Red Lotus demonic fire. Seeing the flaming sword on the rising dragon platform, Nie Tian's voice trembled. "I didn't expect Gu Wuyo's Crimson Soul Red Lotus to produce the Red Lotus demonic fire." The Red Lotus demonic fire was ranked 11th on the demonic fire list, and was even more terrifying than the Doomsday Flame, which was ranked 13th. The Red Lotus demonic fire was the most bizarre of all the demonic fires, because it was not born from nature, but from the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. The Crimson Soul Red Lotus was formed from the soul of the Red Lotus demonic fox, one of the 9 supreme demonic beasts of the demon world. The Red Lotus demonic fox was a mutated ancient demonic beast, a terrifying existence that surpassed the 9th grade. Therefore, it was rumored that the Red Lotus demonic fire could instantly kill a peak heavenly emperor powerhouse. However, the Red Lotus demonic fire had 9 wheels. Even the Red Lotus demon lord, who had refined the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, only had 6 wheels in his body when he died. Nie Tian had once fought with the Red Lotus demon lord. Even though the Red Lotus demonic fire only had 6 wheels, it was enough to make Nie Tian struggle. If the Red Lotus demonic fire had 9 wheels, Nie Tian would have died. Looking at Gu Wuyo's Red Lotus demonic fire, there was a light rotating in the center of each flame. Obviously, it was only 1 wheel. However, this was already very terrifying. Nie Tian estimated that even if there was only 1 round of the Red Lotus demonic flame, it would be enough to instantly kill a warrior below the 3rd level of True Element. It could even threaten a high-level True Element realm warrior. Yeah. At this moment, the 9th-level Chaos Beast in the Chaotic Origin coffin suddenly woke up and let out a strange cry. Its crimson eyes looked at the Red Lotus demonic fire on the rising dragon platform, burning with desire. Ever since Little Nine swallowed the Doomsday Flame, it had been busy refining it. It would only wake up when Nye Tian was in danger. Now that he had woken up, it was obvious that he was very interested in the Red Lotus demonic fire. Yeah. Little Nine's eyes were burning, looking at the Red Lotus demonic flame as if it was about to jump up. Foodie! Corpse Luo Demon Monarch couldn't help but say when he saw Little Nine's actions, but the latter immediately looked at him with ill intentions, scaring Corpse Luo so much that he hurriedly waved his little claws and said, "Brother Nine, you've misunderstood. I'm talking about myself." Little Nine proudly turned his head away, a "that's more like it" expression on his face. Nye Tian was rendered speechless by everything that had happened in the Primal Chaos original coffin. If it wasn't for the fact that he was currently climbing the rising dragon platform, he would have laughed out loud. Little Nine was indeed a foodie. He wanted to eat anything and dared to eat anything. He wanted to eat the Doomsday Flame, the Tier 8 medicinal herbs, the ancient dragon soul, and even the Red Lotus demonic flame. If the Nye Tian in his previous life had such a powerful gluttonous primordial spirit, then he wouldn't need to fear the Red Lotus demon monarch. He could just directly devour the Red Lotus demonic fire. Bang! At that moment, the Red Lotus demonic flame condensed a sword of flames and struck a dragon. With a muffled sound, the sword pierced through one of the dragon's arms. Awoh! The dragon let out a pained howl, but the next moment, the injured part not only stopped bleeding, but it also recovered in an instant. It recovered directly? Gu Wuyo looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. Blue Eye freeze. On the other side, Rui Qianyu released the power of her eyes. Both the blue and red eyes were activated at the same time. Boom! Instantly, an icy aura spread out. Crack, crack, crack. A dragon was directly frozen. In the next moment, a pair of pure flame wings appeared. Like a giant burning bird, it flew towards the dragon. The dragon sensed the threat, but it was frozen, unable to move its huge body. However, the moment the ice seal was lifted, the flaming wings swept past, and the divine dragon looked as if it had been fried in a pan of oil. The dragon's scales all over its body cracked, and even its flesh was torn apart. It was extremely terrifying. The power of the 9-color eyes was not to be underestimated. What a terrifying power! The crowd shuddered. A dragon was destroyed to this extent by the power of the eyes. It was too terrifying. Who the hell is this woman? Why are her eyes so terrifying? Her eyes seem to be even scarier than the Tang family's ghost eye. Could they be one of the legendary 10 exceptional eyes? She was able to step onto the 10th level of the rising dragon platform and fight with the dragon. That pair of eyes must be one of the 10 exceptional eyes. The crowd discussed. The Vice City Lord of Chaos City, Wan Qirong, was looking at Rainy Qianye with a burning gaze. She couldn't help but smile, as if she was rejoicing that she had taken in a good disciple, but she also seemed to be thinking about something else. Rui Qianyu used the power of the 9-color eyes and the red eye to cause great damage to the dragon. However, in the next moment, the dragon's almost destructive damage actually began to recover. Because Rui Qianyu had used the 9-color eyes too much, blood seeped out of her eyes. She staggered and almost couldn't stand. "Are you all right?" Gu Wuyo came to her side and helped her up. Rui Qianyu nodded indifferently and didn't say anything else. She still had a blood feud with the Bloody Slaughter Palace. How could she die in the Rising Dragon formation? Oh no! Nye Tian saw the blood seeping out of Rui Qianyu's eyes and knew that the power of the blood devourer in her body was starting to backfire. Activating the blue eye and red eye was definitely a huge burden for Rui Qianyu. "Let's go!" Nye Tian bellowed as he leapt into the air and landed firmly on the 10th floor. Roar! The deep sigh of the rising dragon sounded again. At almost the same time, two figures stood on either side of him. One was Tang 13, and the other was the black-robed martial artist with the faceless mask. They went up, all three of them went up. The crowd exclaimed. It was strange that three people went up to the 10th level at the same time. Huh! Nie Tian felt the murderous aura coming from the faceless man next to him. However, the woman ignored him completely. Her eyes were fixed on Rainy Thousand Leaves, who was on the rising dragon platform. He knows Rui Qianyu? Nie Tian was confused, but he didn't have time to think. He continued to climb. He was currently on the 10th level of the rising dragon platform, and he could feel the pressure. The moment he leaped onto the platform, he was shocked by the energy that came from all directions. It was understandable that Tang 13 was able to make it to the 10th level. However, the faceless man next to her had also made it to the 10th level. What's more, he was slightly slower than Nie Tian and Tang 13. His talent was terrifying. Go! Nie Tian and Tang 13 looked at each other. Without hesitation, they leaped into the air again. Under the watchful eyes of countless pairs of eyes, the three figures leaped into the air at the same time. Then, they leaped into the air again and landed again. The three of them were like three gods. At this moment they were the kings, the dominators. Chapter 462. The three of them stepped onto the rising dragon platform at the same time, causing the rising dragon pillar to spew out 3 5-colored cyclones. Nie Tian and the others dodged the cyclone's attack, but their expressions became even more nervous. The two dragons just now had manifested from one of these cyclones. Everyone came to a realization. Every time someone stepped onto the rising dragon platform, the rising dragon stone pillar would manifest a divine dragon. Are you guys alright? Nie Tian ignored the 3 cyclones and went to Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo. The crimson soul red lotus behind Gu Wuyo had already disappeared. Her face was pale, and it was obvious that she had reached her limit. Although she was covered in blood, she was not injured. But Rui Qianyu was different. She had forcefully opened her 9-colored pupils, and she had even opened both pupils at the same time, triggering the backlash of the blood devourer in her body. Her life was in danger. I'm fine. Rui Qianyu shook her head slightly, but her pale face and the blood seeping out of her eyes betrayed her. Master, the blood devourer in her body has reached its most violent state. Without the dragon blood to suppress it, her life will be in danger, Corpse Lord reminded. What about the dragon blood? Nie Tian asked solemnly. Rui Qianyu shook her head. The dragon blood had been used up. When she left Heaven Luo City, Nie Tian gave her a big bottle of dragon blood, but it had been used up. Nie Tian frowned. He remembered that the dragon blood he gave Rui Qianyu could last for about a month, but it had been used up in less than a month. Perhaps Rui Qianyu was cultivating some terrifying martial art. Nie Tian sensed a strange aura from her. It seemed to be a very complicated elemental aura. Corpse Lord, do you have a way to help her suppress the blood devourer? Nie Tian asked anxiously. No. Corpse Lord shook his head and said, I'm too weak now. I can't devour the blood devourer. Nie Tian glanced at the small body of the corpse demon monarch and fell silent. If the corpse demon monarch were to forcefully devour the power of the blood devourer, he might not be able to withstand it and might even die. Even though Corpse Luo was now Nie Tian's blood contract slave, he couldn't ask him to die. I can save her. At that moment, the mysterious faceless man suddenly spoke. His voice was absolutely cold, as though it did not contain any emotions. Why should I believe you? Nie Tian looked at him, frowning in thought. You don't have a choice. The faceless man's eyes were like a cold pond, bottomless. Even Nie Tian couldn't see through them. I believe in him. Suddenly, Rui Qianyu looked at the faceless man. There was a slight ripple on her icy face. It was a slight tremble with a hint of excitement. Huh! Nie Tian was confused. Did this faceless man really know Rui Qianyu? Since the faceless man was able to step onto the rising dragon arena so easily, he should not be an ordinary person. But did he really have the ability to save Rui Qianyu? The power of the 9-colored eyes blood devour was something that even the corpse demon Monarch was helpless against. Seeing that Nie Tian was still hesitating, the faceless man spoke again. In this world, the only person I won't hurt is her, Rui Qianyu. You know my name? Rui Qianyu's cold face showed surprise. She did not know this faceless man at all, but he gave her an inexplicable sense of familiarity, a natural sense of trust. Her instincts told her that the person in front of her would not hurt her. Nie Tian stared at the faceless man, but the latter's eyes were like the ocean, bottomless. Even Nie Tian couldn't see what was hidden behind those eyes. I'm not your enemy, at least not now. The faceless man spoke calmly, but there was a hint of anxiety in his indifference. Fine. Nie Tian finally gave in. Rui Qianyu was already in danger. He had no other choice. I'll leave these things to you. After saying that, the faceless man walked forward and gestured for Rui Qianyu to sit down. The two of them sat cross-legged, and the faceless man began to burn all the blood in his body, slowly transferring it into Rui Qianyu's body. They're blood relatives. Seeing this, Nie Tian suddenly realized that the faceless man and Rui Qianyu were blood relatives. A martial artist's blood represented the martial artist's life force, and there were bloodline restrictions in the blood, so they could not be merged with each other, unless they were blood relatives, such as father and son, mother and daughter, brother and sister. Could he be Rui Qianyu's brother? Nie Tian was shocked and made a guess. Although he could not see the faceless man's face, Nie Tian could sense that the faceless man should be around 25 years old, slightly older than Rui Qianyu. At this age, he could only be Rui Qianyu's brother. However, Nie Tian had never heard that Rui Qianyu had a brother. From what Elderly had told him about Rui Qianyu, Nie Tian knew that Rui Qianyu was from the Bloody Slaughter Palace, and she was the Bloody Slaughter Palace's holy maiden. Elderly had said that the Bloody Slaughter Palace had been annihilated in a single night. Other than him, the three lay brothers, and Ruoyu and Qianye, who were not at the Bloody Slaughter Palace at that time, no one else had survived. Could there be other survivors from the Bloody Slaughter Palace, and this faceless man is one of them? Nie Tian had thousands of questions in his mind, but the situation was critical, so it was not the time to think about it seriously. Tang 13, protect them. Leave these 5 little dragons to me. Nie Tian growled and stepped forward. His body was as steady as a mountain, blocking the 5 divine dragons from approaching Rui Qianyu and the others. Each of the 5 divine dragons was hundreds of meters long. Nie Tian's figure seemed small in front of them, but he had the aura of one man holding the pass against 10,000 enemies. The divine dragons that came out of the rising dragon stone pillar were very strange, and any injury could be healed in the blink of an eye. The 2 divine dragons that were seriously injured by Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo had already fully recovered. The strength of these headless divine dragons should be strong when the enemy is strong, and weak when the enemy is weak. If they really unleash the power of the divine dragons, there's no way I can fight them. Nie Tian could feel the surging dragon energy from the 5 divine dragons, and the corner of his mouth curled up strangely. He had already realized that the strength of the divine dragons was the same as the strength of their opponents. The stronger the opponent, the stronger the divine dragons. The weaker the opponent, the weaker the divine dragons. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo used the rainbow pupils and crimson soul red lotus. Not only did they not hurt the divine dragons, but they also stimulated the latter's strength. The rage of the rising dragon was actually a test of the rising dragon platform. If the person on the platform was a spirit wheel stage expert, the strength of the dragon would definitely be stronger. If it was an elemental pulse stage warrior, the strength of the dragon would be very weak. Nie Tian's strength was only at the 4th rank of the giant soul stage. Standing in front of the 5 divine dragons was equivalent to greatly weakening their strength. The 5 divine dragons roared at the sky, but they could feel a surge of power from Nietian. Their eyes were filled with deep fear and respect for the king. Seeing this, Nietian was puzzled. Even if he was strong, he was not strong enough to make the divine dragons fear him. Dragon scale energy. In the next moment, Nietian immediately figured out the reason. It must be the dragon scale energy in his body. Chapter 463. Roar. A divine dragon let out an angry roar. As if it was testing the waters, its huge body came crashing down and its steel-like dragon claws came down from the sky. It seemed to have the power to tear through everything. Instantly, the dragon chi spread out like a tidal wave, causing Nietian to feel an irresistible force. Nietian took a few steps back and calmed his mind. The absolute heaven slash appeared in his hand as he roared, "Reckless beast, since you're courting death, I'll slay the dragon today." Slay the dragon. As soon as the last 2 words fell, Nietian's aura surged. The yuan meridians in his body revolved crazily, and waves of yuan force gushed out. In just an instant, his aura rose to a terrifying level. Climbing the rising dragon platform had almost depleted Nietian's yuan force, but the moment he stepped onto the platform, all his yuan force returned. This should be a mysterious mechanism of the rising dragon platform. Otherwise, even if a martial artist stepped onto the rising dragon platform, without yuan force, they would not be able to fight against a divine dragon. He was currently in the 4th layer of the giant spirit realm, and his body had awakened 12 million astral energy. Even without using astral souls, he could barely fight against a 1st-layer true energy realm martial artist. Sky-piercing sword. The battle prowess that exceeded his own strength excited Nietian. With a roar, he struck out with his sword. Instantly, sword chi overflowed, and a 100-meter-long sword shadow appeared, slamming towards the divine dragon with great force. The murderous sword chi surged out, and waves of aura wrapped around the 100-meter-long divine dragon like the tentacles of the Grim Reaper. Kill! Nietian spat out a cold voice. The sword shadow fell, and a white ray of light struck the largest scale on the divine dragon's chest. With a loud crash, the giant scale was smashed off by the powerful impact. Immediately, the terrifying sword chi surged out like a wild beast, and in an instant, the scales on the divine dragon's body were peeled off piece by piece. Then, the flesh and blood of the divine dragon split open, inch by inch. Awoo! The divine dragon let out a tragic cry, and the surging dragon chi had an additional hint of sorrow. Hua! The terrifying sword shadow fell mercilessly. With a loud bang, a deep gash appeared on the rising dragon platform, and the divine dragon was directly cut in half by Nietian's sword. Hiss! Seeing this scene, everyone gasped and couldn't believe their eyes. Nietian was only at the 4th level of the giant spirit state, and that divine dragon was not even afraid of the scarlet soul red lotus and the rainbow pupils, but it was actually killed by his sword. Nietian's battle prowess was terrifying. Of course, there were also people who saw through the truth. Yao Fei put away his shocked expression and said, "The mystical dragons on the rising dragon platform adjust their combat prowess according to the strength of their opponents. If Nietian is weak, the mystical dragons will be weakened as well. However, his true combat prowess far exceeds that of warriors of the same level. I think even the rising dragon platform did not realize this." Master Yao. At the side, Gu Qiulong nodded slightly, then shook his head and said, "The rising dragon platform tests a warrior's talent. I think the person who set up the array formation was looking for a warrior like Nietian City Lord, who is weak but strong. Only someone like that can be considered a true super genius." Yao Fei was slightly taken aback, then nodded solemnly. Nietian was overjoyed to see that the divine dragon was killed with a single slash and could no longer recover. Yao Fei and Gu Qiulong only saw the first point, but not the second. Nietian was able to kill the dragon with a single slash, not only because the divine dragon was weak, but more importantly, he knew the divine dragon clan's weakness: the heart-protecting dragon scale. The divine dragon clan was a terrifying existence that surpassed rank 9 spiritual beasts. The dragon energy in their bodies made them almost immortal. Even with heaven-defying items like the 9-colored pupils and crimson soul red lotus, they could recover in an instant. However, the dragon heart in the chest of the divine dragon clan was a fatal weakness. It was where all the dragon energy and blood essence in the body gathered. Once it was destroyed, it would affect the rest of the body. Not only would the dragon be unable to recover, but the dragon body would also be destroyed. Even the dragon's soul would disappear. Hence, the dragon scale of the divine dragon clan was the hardest part of the scales on the body. It was known as the dragon's reverse scale. Nietian was aware of this weakness of the divine dragon clan. That was why he had first broken the dragon scale, then heavily injured the dragon heart. Only then could he kill the divine dragon with a single slash. If he had not known this, Nietian would not have been able to kill the divine dragon before him even if he died of exhaustion. Good stuff. Nietian took a step forward and reached out to catch the dragon scale. Unfortunately, before his hand could warm up, the dragon scale turned into a ball of light and disappeared. Nietian was too naive this time. The divine dragon in front of him was a manifestation of the stone pillar of the rising dragon. It had no physical body. The dragon scale was, of course, fake. Almost at the same time, the divine dragon's corpse on the ground also turned into a ball of light and disappeared. Tang 13 and the others behind Nietian were shocked speechless when they saw him kill a divine dragon with a single slash. They knew that Nietian was strong, but they did not expect him to be this strong. Then, in for a penny, in for a pound, Nietian rapidly slashed out with his sword and killed the other 4 divine dragons. The crowd was so shocked by his feat that they were all expressionless. Was this guy a human or a ghost? He was a dragon-slaying executioner. Just as Nietian killed the last divine dragon, the spinning stone pillar of the rising dragon suddenly stopped. Then, the voice boomed again: "The human emperor slays the dragon. The Lord of the 9 stars of the divine dragon has appeared. The dragon vein of the 9 stars has recognized its owner." As the majestic voice rang out, everyone's hearts shuddered. At this moment, their souls felt a sense of awe, and their eyes went blank. Looking at the young man holding the longsword on the rising dragon arena, they could vaguely see a supreme emperor standing proudly between the heavens and earth, as tall as a mountain. The human emperor slays the dragon? Nietian was stunned at first. Then, his face stiffened. The human emperor is me? Kaboom! Just as he was in shock, the entire rising dragon platform shook violently. It was on the verge of collapsing. "Let's leave." The faceless man seemed to have sensed something. He shouted and leaped off the platform with Rui Qinyu. Tang 13 glanced at Nietian. The latter nodded. Without hesitation, he leaped off the rising dragon platform with Gu Wuyo. Only Nietian was left on the rising dragon platform. There was no trace of fear on his face. Instead, he was excited. His instincts told him that something earth-shattering was about to happen. Kaboom! Another loud rumble. It was as if a powerful force had emerged from underground. The rising dragon platform could no longer withstand it, and the giant steps began to crumble. Rocks flew everywhere and dust filled the air. In an instant, heaven and earth shook and the color of the sky changed. Nietian stood among the rubble. He ignored everything around him and stared at the ball of array light on the stone pillar of the rising dragon. Dragon vein of the 9 stars, recognize its owner. At that moment the voice boomed. The stone pillar of the rising dragon shuddered and crumbled. The 5-colored ball of light on the stone pillar released an irresistible force that sucked Nietian in. Chapter 464. The moment his mind stabilized, Nietian felt the soles of his feet become empty, and he began to fall instantly. Nie Tian felt that he was in a secret, enclosed space. The wind whistled past his ears, but there was a dazzling, colorful light in front of him. The moment he fell, he felt something huge swimming above his head. He looked up and his expression instantly froze. Above his head, there were actually 9 golden dragons, each of which was thousands of meters long, wandering in the sky. Above the 9 heavens, countless thunderbolts struck down, connecting to form a sea of thunderbolt. The 9 golden dragons were connected head to tail, as if they had formed some kind of mysterious formation, blocking the thunderbolts from falling. At this time, the speed at which Nie Tian fell became faster and faster, as if he was falling into a bottomless abyss. In the space below, there was a scorching wave of air whistling over. Nie Tian saw that his body was being peeled off by this scorching wave of air, and his skin was peeling off bit by bit. The strange thing was that there was not a single trace of blood. Then, his flesh was melted, and his drenched white bones were exposed, slowly becoming charred black, and slowly turning into ashes. Damn! Nie Tian was scared out of his wits by the changes in his body. He gradually could not feel the existence of his body, as if only his soul was wandering in the void. This was a very strange feeling, as if he had become one with everything around him, and there was no distinction between them. Just when Nie Tian felt that his body had completely disappeared, the speed at which he was falling suddenly slowed down, and finally stopped. At this time, Nie Tian was in a whole new world, and the world in front of him completely stunned him. There was colorful light flowing in all directions, and the gentle and gorgeous lines of light occupied the entire space. Such a scene was dazzlingly beautiful, so beautiful that it could move one's soul, so beautiful that it could frighten one's soul, so beautiful that it should not exist. At this time, Nie Tian felt that he had become one with the world in front of him, and with a thought, he could go to any corner of this space. What is this place? After a long time, Nie Tian calmed down, but he still could not feel the existence of his body. He could not help but mutter to himself. There was no sound around him, and even the sound of the wind had disappeared. Nie Tian looked down and suddenly discovered a colorful ball of light. It was very similar to the 5-colored ball of light on the rising dragon stone pillar, but it was thousands of times larger. As the multicolored ball of light rotated, a 7-colored radiance was slowly released, forming rays of light that circulated in the air. What is this ball of light? Could it be a sun? Nie Tian murmured. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. At this time, the sea of lightning above their heads disappeared, and the 9-headed golden dragon slowly came to the side of the colorful ball of light. The 9-headed dragon's body slowly entered the ball of light. The body that entered the ball of light turned into rays of light and fused with the ball of light. These golden colossal dragons are actually sacrificing themselves by fusing all their dragon chi and blood essence into that sphere of light. Nie Tian was even more surprised when he saw that. A moment later, the 9 giant dragons disappeared, and 9 dazzling white rays appeared above the huge ball of light. 9-star dragon vein. Nie Tian was at a loss for words. He did not know why he knew that the 9 rays of white light were the 9-star dragon vein. Whoosh! At this time, an invisible power suddenly surged out of the huge ball of light. Nie Tian felt his soul instantly appear in the center of the ball of light. 9-star dragon vein master, dragon vein refinement. The rumbling voice sounded again, solemn and holy. Nie Tian was in the center of the ball of light, and he could feel the immense power tearing at his soul. That pain was something that he would remember for the rest of his life. Then, a strange scene appeared. The ball of light continuously released mysterious power, which transformed into balls of light that struck the soul in the center of the ball of light. Slowly, the nerves, blood vessels, tissues, bones, and skin appeared layer by layer. It was as if a master sketcher was drawing, and a human figure gradually appeared. When the face of the human figure was drawn, it was strangely familiar. It was Nie Tian. Nie Tian felt as if he had been reborn after his body had been destroyed. He felt as if he had been reborn. His strength was on the verge of exploding, and he was like a divine dragon that had broken out of the abyss. His soaring aura made him look down upon heaven and earth. In the next moment, before Nie Tian could think, he felt his body turn into a black hole, and the ball of light that enveloped him began to collapse. In the blink of an eye, the entire ball of light entered Nie Tian's body and disappeared completely, as if it had never been there. In the next second, the illusion around Nie Tian changed. In front of him was the collapsed rising dragon platform, and the flying rubble whistled past his ears. Nie Tian was stunned for a long time, and he finally reacted. He looked up, and the ball of light on the rising dragon stone pillar had disappeared. Everything that had just happened, his body being destroyed and then reborn, was like a dream. However, logic told Nie Tian that it was definitely not a dream, because he could feel that his body was different from before. As for what exactly was different, he was not sure. The Lord of the 9 stars of the Divine Dragon, the 9 stars of the Dragon Vein, what did the rising dragon platform leave in my body? Nie Tian was extremely confused, but now was not the time for him to think about it. Nie Tian looked into his soul dimension. Everything was normal in the chaotic original coffin, as if nothing had happened. He felt much more at ease. The colorful ball of light disappeared, and so did the rising dragon formation. Most of the martial artists had left the rising dragon platform. Nie Tian saw that the faceless man was still transferring blood qi to Rui Qinyu not far away, and he quickly flew over. "Mr. Nie, are you all right?" Elder Yi saw that Nie Tian's expression was a little strange, and he could not help but ask. "I'm fine." Nie Tian nodded and looked at the faceless man. The faceless man burned his own blood qi and merged it into Rui Qinyu's body. Nie Tian found that the faceless man's blood qi was very strange, and it was several times more vigorous than an ordinary person's. Corpse Luo, this guy. Nie Tian frowned slightly, as if he had thought of something, but he was not sure. He asked Corpse Luo Demon Lord in the chaotic original coffin for confirmation. "Master." Corpse Luo Demon Lord's voice was trembling. This guy has the legendary 9 Yang body. It really is the 9 Yang body. No wonder his blood qi is so much more vigorous than ordinary people." Nie Tian took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He did not expect that the faceless man in front of him, who was related to Rui Qianyu by blood, was the legendary 9 Yang body. The 9 Yang body was a very rare heaven-rank advanced spirit body, and it was even more terrifying than Zhang Xiaoyi's Battle Cloud Tyrant body. Chapter 465. Hearing Corpse Demon Lord's words, Nie Tian's expression changed slightly as he looked at the mysterious faceless man. No wonder his blood qi was so overbearing and even more terrifying than pure dragon blood. It was able to suppress the blood power in Rui Qinyu's body. It turned out to be the blood qi of 9 Yang. The body of 9 Yang was the strongest Yang spiritual body in the world. Therefore, the blood qi in the faceless man's body was the blood qi of 9 Yang, which had a natural restraining effect on the blood power. The faceless man should have known this long ago. Otherwise, he would not have been so confident in injecting blood qi into Rui Qianyu. Is this guy really Rui Qianyu's brother? Nie Tian was puzzled. It had to be said that the faceless man was also very powerful. He was only 25 or 26 years old, but he was already in the 9th tier of the primordial element. Coupled with his body of 9 Yang, Nie Tian estimated that this man's real combat strength was no weaker than a warrior in the 1st tier of the divine wheel. Just now, this guy easily stepped onto the rising dragon platform. There was no doubt that his martial arts talent was unquestionable. There was no doubt that this person's martial arts achievements in the future would be limitless. A moment later, Rainy Thousand Leaves' pale face gradually recovered, and some color returned to her face. However, this time, the faceless man did not stop. The blood chi in his body gushed out even more wildly. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment and said in a deep voice, "What are you doing? If you continue to burn the blood chi in your body, you will die." The faceless man had already burned too much blood chi. Even if he had the body of 9 yang, his life would be in danger if he continued. However, the faceless man ignored Nye Tian's words and continued to burn his blood chi. The air was filled with blood chi, and a scorching wave of air spread out like a scorching sun. Everyone felt the heat and backed away. "Master!" Corpse Demon Lord spoke again. His small body stiffened and trembled. He is absorbing the blood power." Nye Tian probed with his divine sense and found that Rui Qinyu's body was constantly surging with black blood devouring power, while the faceless man formed a 9 yang blood chi vortex in his body, madly absorbing the blood-devouring power. Nye Tian immediately understood that the faceless man was transferring the power of blood devour from Rui Qinyu to himself. This is an extremely dangerous method. If the 9 yang blood chi in his body is not strong enough, then he could be devoured by the blood-devouring power at any time. However, the faceless man had already begun to transfer the power of the blood drain. If he were to stop it now, both he and Rui Qinyu would be in danger. Nye Tian's expression was solemn. He thought to himself, "You risked your life for Rui Qinyu. You must be her closest relative." Faceless man was helping Rui Qinyu to transfer the malevolent blood energy. No one else could help but stand aside and watch. Nye Tian glanced at the ruins of the Rising Dragon Arena and began to observe the surroundings. At this time, he discovered that the surroundings were actually a boundless desert. Yellow sand billowed in the air, covering the sky and the sun. The sand dunes in the distance were like golden waves, rising and falling one after another, giving people a feeling that they were slowly surging. The surrounding cultivators were scattered around, carefully observing the surroundings. No one would have thought that the chaotic abyss was actually a desert. This time, if it wasn't for Nye Tian breaking the Rising Dragon killing array, everyone would have lost their lives here. "Gooden, did you come here the last time you entered the chaotic lands?" Although he knew that there was no hope, Nye Tian still asked. Gooden shook his head and said, "The last time I came here, it was a canyon, not a desert." Nye Tian sighed softly. He looked into the distance and suddenly noticed something. His expression slowly changed. At this time, Yao Fei came to Nye Tian and said in a low voice, "Nye Tian, City Lord." "I heard it." Nye Tian nodded solemnly. His expression was very ugly. He heard a dense rustling sound coming from afar. It seemed to be coming from the ground, as if there was a huge creature moving at high speed underground. "Mr. Nye, what's wrong?" Elder Yi asked in a low voice. "There's something underground." Nye Tian's expression was solemn. He turned to look at the faceless man and Rui Qinyu. This was a crucial moment for the transfer of the blood devour power. No one could disturb them. Nye Tian had to ensure the safety of the two. After a while, the others also noticed that something was wrong. The ground seemed to be shaking. The deputy city lord of Chaos City, Wan Qirong, came to Rui Qinyu's side and immediately understood what the faceless man was doing. She shouted to the 3 female disciples beside her, "Protect Rui Qinyu!" "Yes." The 3 female disciples replied in unison. Everyone felt something was wrong and subconsciously gathered around. Everyone looked into the distance. The sand dunes there seemed to be pushed by a huge force. They were surging like waves, whistling in their direction. "What on earth is that?" Nye Tian probed with his divine sense, wanting to sense what was underground. However, he discovered that there was a vibrating force coming from underground. The entire ground was almost cracked by this force. Could it be some kind of terrifying spirit beast? Although the environment here is not good, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is several times denser than the outside world. If it's a spirit beast, it must be terrifyingly powerful. Nye Tian guessed in his heart. His expression became even more solemn. Everyone, form a circle. Don't move. Nie Tian yelled. There was a hint of panic in his voice. Everyone looked ahead with fear in their eyes. They subconsciously obeyed Nie Tian's words and formed a circle. The powerful martial artists stood at the outermost, while the weaker ones stood in the middle. At this time, they had to work together, because no one knew what kind of enemy they would face next. After a while, the sound from underground grew louder and louder, and soon turned into a roar. The sand waves in the distance were more than 10 meters high, and from afar, it looked like a collapsing wall of sand, covering the sky and covering the earth. The earth began to shake violently. The shaking caused the sand to fly all over the sky. The sand flew on people's faces, making them unable to open their eyes. Everyone was ready to face the unknown enemy underground. Rumble! The ground shook even more violently. The surrounding ground rose high. It seemed that there was a huge thing moving from underground. It was going to break out of the sand at any time. They're coming. Be careful! Nie Tian yelled. His heart was in his throat. Nie Tian glanced over and was shocked to find that the moving sand dunes were endless. He couldn't see the end of them. It was hard to imagine how terrifying the thing under the ground was. Boom! Suddenly, the sand dunes rose high and then fell down in an instant. Bang, bang, bang! Before anyone could react, countless black shadows suddenly sprang out from the surrounding ground. They were like sharp arrows. The black shadows weren't too big. They were about 3 or 4 meters long. However, there were a lot of them. They were black, and there was a cracking sound. It was very strange. It's a snake. Seeing these black shadows clearly, everyone gasped. Chapter 466. There were many sand snakes. They were densely packed together, forming a sea of sand snakes. When they gathered together, they were dozens of meters tall. The sand snakes' tails were vibrating very quickly. The crackling sounds in the air were produced by their tails. Their earthy yellow eyes emitted a cold chill. When they looked at everyone, they shuddered. It was these sand snakes that were sneaking underground just now. Their bodies were not big, but there were too many of them. That was why the ground was shaking violently. There were too many sand snakes. They were sneaking underground, causing the entire sand dune to move. F***CK. What the F***CK is this? Why are there so many snakes all of a sudden? Everyone looked around and screamed. The sand snakes were black and dense, like a rolling wave. They could not see the end of it. The black sand snakes were squeezed together, flicking their scarlet tongues. The air was filled with the smell of blood and killing. However, these sand snakes did not attack immediately. They seemed to be testing something. Faceless Man and Rui Qianyu were still sitting cross-legged, as if they were ignoring the movements of the outside world. Elder Yi, protect the two of them. Nie Tian looked back at the two and said in a low voice. Elder Yi did not ask about the relationship between Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu. He just nodded. These sand snakes were not big. They were only 3 to 4 meters long and as thick as a baby's wrist. However, there were too many of them. When they attacked together, it was terrifying. Woo! At this moment, there was an intense sound of a horn in the distance. The invisible sound wave had a strange effect on the sand snake. The next moment, all the sand snakes became agitated. Their tails vibrated even more violently. There was a crackling sound in the air, like a sharp explosion. Someone is controlling these sand snakes. Elder Yi was shocked and could not help but shout. Nie Tian also noticed the impact of the horn on the sand snakes. His expression became even more serious. To be able to control so many sand snakes at the same time, this person's strength was unimaginable. Whoosh! All of the sand snakes opened their mouths almost 180 degrees, revealing 2 barbed fangs. A gust of wind that smelled of blood assaulted the nostrils, and soon after, it came crashing down like a stormy sea. Everyone felt their hearts tremble, and then they didn't hesitate to launch attacks in succession. Bang! 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 Countless martial skills were released in an instant, bombarding the wall of Sand Snake. Immediately, cracks appeared on the wall of Sand Snake. Nye Tian jumped into the air and looked around. Then, he sucked in a breath of cold air. There were so many sand snakes that he couldn't even see the end of them. They covered an area that was dozens of kilometers in diameter. With so many sand snakes, their numbers were at least in the hundreds of millions. Night-toppling sword. Nye Tian no longer hesitated. He chopped down with his sword, and 100-meter-long sword image pressed down majestically. With a loud boom, a huge gap appeared in the group of sand snakes. One sand snake after another danced in midair, and shot towards Nye Tian like arrows that had just been shot from bowstrings. *T. This was Nye Tian's first time making a move, and he immediately had a bad feeling. These sand snakes had extremely strong defensive power. Surprisingly, the sand snakes that he had struck didn't die. They only felt dizzy for a brief moment before recovering. The power of Nye Tian's sword was something that even a 9th-level giant spirit martial artist would have a hard time withstanding. Yet, these sand snakes were unscathed. It was truly frightening. What was even more shocking was that the countless sand snakes leapt up, and on their backs, 2 thin wing-like things spread open. The wing-like things flapped rapidly, and their speed suddenly increased as they rapidly pounced over. 300 billion sword images! Nye Tian saw that the situation wasn't right. He stabbed out with his sword, and countless sword images gushed out, clashing head-on with the sand snakes. Bang, bang, bang! Sounds of collisions came from beside him. Countless sand snakes were knocked unconscious and fell down. The situation below wasn't good either. Although everyone had blocked most of the sand snake's attacks, the sand snake wall was getting thicker and thicker. The martial artist's punches and palms landed on the wall, but the damage caused was getting smaller and smaller. With so many sand snakes gathered together, even a spirit wheel realm martial artist's spirit wheel space would be suppressed. In the distance, layers of sand snakes were like waves. Each wave was higher than the one before, and they came crashing over majestically. *T. If we are surrounded by these sand snakes, it will be hard to escape. Nye Tian immediately understood that the person controlling the sand snakes wanted to surround them and slowly nibble them away. Charge out! Someone realized that something was wrong and shouted. Nye Tian looked down and saw that the person who shouted was Wu Mang. This guy was severely injured by the rising dragon formation, and he had already recovered. However, the physique of a spirit wheel realm martial artist was indeed strong. Kill! Wu Mang roared, and his eyes were completely red. A black spear appeared in his hand, and he struck out with it, forcefully breaking a big hole in the sand snake wall. Ha! Let's go! When Wu Mang saw that there was an additional path in front of him, he smiled sinisterly and was the first to rush in. The people behind Wu Mang were the people from the Alchemist Guild and the Danwu Hall. Diao Zhengde was also among them. Idiot! Don't rush in recklessly! Nye Tian roared and was about to curse. Wu Mang didn't know how many sand snakes were in front of him. He was simply courting death if he wanted to rush out just by opening a hole. The sand snakes were boundless, and he couldn't see the end of it. If he rushed in like this, it was no different from seeking his own death. Before he could rush out, he would die in the pile of sand snake. Diao Zhengde raised his head and looked at Nye Tian, who was in midair. After a moment of consideration, he chose to believe in Nye Tian's judgment and shouted at Wu Mang, "Commander Wu, come back quickly." Unfortunately, Wu Mang's figure had already rushed in. Under the noise of the sand snakes, he couldn't hear Diao Zhengde's voice at all. The instant Wu Mang's figure rushed in, the sand snakes immediately blocked the hole, and his figure was completely submerged. Idiot! Nye Tian cursed and no longer cared about Wu Mang. His eyes looked at Faceless Man and Rui Qianyu. He had already thought of a countermeasure in his heart, but he had to wait for the two of them to transfer the power of the blood drain. Don't bother about him. Guard your positions and don't let the sand snakes rush in. Nye Tian reminded everyone to calm down. This was a moment of life and death. If they were surrounded by the sand snakes, then they would really have no way to survive. Nye Tian raised his head and looked at the dense group of sand snakes in the distance. They were densely packed, causing the entire space to darken. He planned to break out from the air. There were too many sand snakes on the ground, and there was no possibility of rushing out. Everyone's essence energy had not been expended too much yet. If they delayed any longer, when their essence energy was almost depleted, then there would really be no hope. After a moment, Faceless Man and Rui Qianyu finally stood up. Huff! Finally done. Nye Tian sensed that the power of the blood drain in Rui Qianyu's body had already disappeared, and he couldn't help but let out a long breath of turbid air. The power of the blood drain shifted behind Faceless Man. He had the 9-yang physique. As long as he could withstand the first moment, it wouldn't take long for the 9-yang blood qi to completely eliminate the power of the blood drain. Chapter 467. Nye Tian gazed into the distance. All of a sudden, loud roars echoed out from the boundless swarm of sand snakes. Then, four silhouettes that looked like huge waves appeared, as if they were flood dragons that were swimming in the water. Boom! 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 In the next moment, 4 figures rose into the sky. The huge figures were hundreds of meters long. They were actually 4 giant sand snakes. It had the same appearance. It had a dark yellow body and was covered in rugged rock. Its scales were like protruding rock. It looked extremely hard and indestructible. On the head of the giant snake, there was a horn that was several meters long. It looked like a sharp crescent sword and was extremely intimidating. What was more terrifying was that there was a thin layer of wings on their backs, which extended from their head to their tail. It was very strange. Nye Tian could feel that the strength of these 4 giant sand vipers definitely surpassed rank 5 spirit beasts. They were at least equivalent to martial artists in the 5th tier of the true element realm, and their defensive abilities were definitely comparable to martial artists in the divine wheel realm. Spirit wheel realm warriors, open up the spirit wheel space. Everyone, break through from the sky. Nye Tian yelled. If these 4 giant sand vipers came over, it would be very troublesome. At this moment, it was a matter of life and death. Everyone had to work together. Otherwise, only death awaited them. Okay. Elder Yi nodded and was the first to respond to Nye Tian. He opened up the spirit wheel space and enveloped the surrounding warriors. The other spirit wheel realm warriors, Mo Feng, Qiu Wuhan, Tang Jilang, the outer sanctum elder of the Tang family, Gu Jue, and the deputy city lord of Chaos City, Wan Qirong, glanced at Nye Tian in the sky. At this moment, they chose to believe in him. They opened up their spirit wheel spaces and connected them with Elder Ye's spirit wheel space. Previously at the Rising Dragon formation, Nye Tian had already proved himself. Not only did he step onto the Rising Dragon platform, but he even destroyed the Rising Dragon formation with one slaying dragon. Although his strength was far from being the strongest, his reaction in the face of danger was far superior to the others. All the warriors of the Spirit Wheel realm connected the Spirit Wheel space and enveloped the 200 warriors. Go! Nye Tian roared. Elder Yi and the others glanced at each other. Their silhouettes rose from the ground. More than 200 martial artists flew up at the same time. Everyone flew into the air and looked around. They were surrounded by endless sand snakes, and they couldn't see the end of them. They all sucked in a breath of cold air, and even their tailbones were cold. Mr. Nye, which way should we go? Elder Ye's expression turned serious as he asked Nye Tian. At this time, Nye Tian had already become the leader. His words represented absolute authority. Over there. Nye Tian pointed casually. Facing the endless sand snakes, he did not know which side was safe, so he could only try his luck. Elder Yi, Mo Feng, and the other ancient martial art practitioners charged at the very front. The ancient martial art practitioners from 2 days ago hid in the divine wheel space and were relatively safe. However, the elemental energy of a spirit wheel realm warrior was limited. When the elemental energy ran out, the spirit wheel space would definitely not be able to be maintained. That would be terrible. Rumble! At this moment, the ground suddenly shook. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. They looked down and saw a badly mutilated figure scuttling out from the sand snake. Commander Wu! Diao Jingda's eyes widened when he saw the figure clearly. Nie Tian took a closer look. That bloody figure was really Wu Mang. This guy foolishly charged into the sand snakes just now, but now he was in an extremely sorry state. His elemental energy was almost depleted, and there was not a piece of intact skin on his body. He must have used his last breath to charge out. Come up! Mo Feng seemed to hesitate for a moment. Finally, he raised his hand and pulled Wu Mang up from the sand snakes and into the divine wheel space. Wu Mang's flesh and blood burst open. It was a tragic sight. Diao Zhengde quickly fed him a few elixirs. Whoosh! An ear-piercing whistling sound suddenly came. It was actually a giant sand viper chasing after them. In the midst of the yellow sand, the giant sand viper charged over. Its huge horn bombarded the divine wheel space. The invisible divine wheel barrier shook violently and was on the verge of collapse. If a divine wheel realm warrior only cared about himself, the divine wheel space would naturally be indestructible. However, now that he was carrying more than 200 other warriors, his defense was greatly reduced. We can't hold on anymore. We can't hold on any longer. Mo Feng shouted in panic. You bunch of trash, hurry up and stop that big snake. Don't let it hit us again. Otherwise, everyone will die. Chiu Wuheng also shouted. When everyone saw the 100-meter-long body of the giant sand viper, they all gasped. No one dared to go out. Warriors of the true energy realm, come out with me. Let's kill this beast. Nie Tian roared. He was the first to come out of the divine wheel space. The proud sword wings appeared on his back, and the long sword in his hand flashed. He was fearless. Chiu Wuheng was right. If the giant sand viper was allowed to ram into the divine wheel space, once the space was broken, everyone would die. Even Wu Mang was in such a miserable state because of the giant sand viper, not to mention the others. Warriors of the giant spirit realm couldn't fly. Therefore, only warriors of the true energy realm could come out to stop the giant sand viper. Howl! The giant sand viper suddenly saw someone blocking in front of it. It immediately let out a low roar and rolled over. Its huge horn pounced at Nie Tian. Nie Tian didn't reply. He held his sword with both hands and slashed down. 100-meter-long sword radiance appeared, but it was directly smashed by the giant sand viper. Nie Tian was also sent flying, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. What a strong force! The giant sand viper was too strong. Nie Tian's sword did not cause any damage to it at all. When the other warriors saw that Nie Tian was beaten to the point where he spat out blood, they were all terrified. They were all hesitating whether they should go out or not. Boss Nie Tian, I'm coming. Gooden was the first to jump out. He used his true energy to float in the air. However, at this moment, another 2 giant sand vipers arrived. Their huge bodies rolled up a powerful aura as they charged at them. Between Nie Tian and Gooden, one with a sword and the other with a fist, they were both pushed back by the giant sand viper. The two of them stood still. Their chests were roiling and they couldn't control themselves. They spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. This time, they had collided with the giant sand viper head-on, and both of them had suffered heavy injuries. Do I have to use my star soul? Nie Tian frowned. He looked at the indifferent crowd below, and his eyes were filled with disappointment. It was already a matter of life and death, but everyone was still thinking about themselves. It was infuriating. Nie Tian, At this moment, a voice sounded. It was Rui Qianyu. However, as soon as she opened her mouth, blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. The blood devour power in her body had just been transferred away, so she was extremely weak now. She had no combat strength at all. At this moment, are you still thinking about yourself? Nye Tian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and laughed coldly. His eyes were filled with extreme disdain. Elder Yi saw that Nye Tian was injured, but the crowd was still indifferent. He couldn't help but roar angrily, "You bunch of cowards! Nye Tian has already saved you once in the Rising Dragon Kill formation. Do you still want him to save you now? He is only in the 4th tier of the Giant Spirit Realm, but he is already fearless. You martial artists who are in the 5th tier of the True Energy Realm and above are hiding in the God Wheel space like turtles. What are you afraid of? What a bunch of King cowards!" Elder Yi had to keep the God Wheel space open. Otherwise, he would have been the first to rush forward. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's expressions turned ugly. At this moment, any martial artist with a bit of courage should stand out. "Nye Tian City Lord, I'm here to help you." At this moment, a figure finally jumped out. It was the Spirit Formation Master, Yao Fi. Chapter 468. Nye Tian City Lord is not a true Origin Realm martial artist. If he is not afraid, what should we be afraid of? Someone's blood was ignited. With a roar, he leaped out. "Damn it, it's just a few small snakes. Why should we be afraid of them?" Everyone's blood was boiling as they leaped out of the Divine Wheel space. At this moment, there were more than 200 martial artists, including 40 to 50 true Origin Realm martial artists. They rushed out together aggressively, forcing the 3 giant sand vipers to retreat. "Phew, thank goodness." Nye Tian exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He did not want to use his star souls unless it was absolutely necessary. Moreover, he knew that the giant sand viper was not the most terrifying enemy. There were even more terrifying opponents hiding in the dark. Although he did not know who was controlling these giant sand vipers and giant sand vipers, Nye Tian could guess that the person hiding behind them must be a strong master. At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly realized that the injuries on his body had unknowingly healed. The bloody wound on his chest had healed in the blink of an eye. It was really strange. Could it be the dragon vein tempering from before? Nye Tian recalled that when he was at the Rising Dragon platform, he had entered a mysterious space. His body had disappeared and been reconstructed. At that time, he had heard a voice saying, "9-star Dragon Vein Master, Dragon Vein Tempering." Dragon Vein Tempering? Could it be that my body is like the divine dragon body and can instantly recover from injuries? A bold guess flashed through his mind. Nye Tian was shocked. However, after he calmed down and thought about it carefully, he confirmed this guess in his heart. When I was in that mysterious space, my body disappeared. Then, the light ball and the 9-star dragon vein, formed by the 9-headed golden dragon, tempered my body again. Now, my body is already a 9-star dragon vein body. Nye Tian understood everything and almost burst out laughing. The 9-star dragon vein body was probably not much weaker than the divine dragon body. Nye Tian felt that the 9-star dragon vein body had just been forged, and its true power had not been unleashed yet. There should be a huge hidden potential waiting for him to discover. Forcing himself to calm down, Nye Tian suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and focused his attention on the battle before him. At this moment, another 3 giant sand vipers appeared. They wanted to attack the Divine Wheel space, but they were blocked by the crowd. Although the giant sand vipers were ferocious, there were too many cultivators. They held an absolute advantage. The 6 snakes were all covered in blood. Their expressions were ferocious, but they still did not give up. "Bastard, why are you still not retreating?" Yao Fik roared angrily and struck out with his palm. The rolling palm energy condensed into a ray of white light. With a swoosh, it directly cut off the single horn of a giant sand viper. Woo! In pain, the giant sand viper let out a low growl. However, it became even more violent and charged at Yao Fik. You're courting death. Countless voices sounded out as several true element level 5th LV martial artists attacked together. Bang! 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 After a flurry of attacks, several horrifying bloody holes appeared on the giant sand viper's body. Blood immediately gushed out, and the stench of blood filled the air for hundreds of meters. The giant sand viper's vitality was extremely strong. After rolling a few times in the air, its huge body was dyed red with blood. After a long time, it finally stopped rolling and fell into the group of sand vipers below. When the other giant sand vipers saw that their companions had been killed, their eyes flashed with violence. They let out low growls and attacked at the same time as if they had gone mad. "Kill these beasts!" All the warriors shouted angrily. Countless shadows of palms and fists appeared in the air, smashing towards the giant sand viper like dense raindrops. Bang! 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 When the attacks landed, the scales on the giant sand viper's body rolled up and blood dripped down. It was a horrifying scene. At this moment, the group of sand vipers below also attacked. They were like sharp arrows, charging towards the crowd in a suicidal manner. Pitter-patter. A crisp sound rang out, like raindrops falling. Everyone was forced to retreat by the group of sand vipers. These small sand vipers were too troublesome. There were too many of them and they were too fast. Everyone had to activate their entire body's defense, which consumed a lot of origin energy. At this moment, a giant sand viper suddenly attacked. Bang! Its huge horn directly hit a warrior who was busy dealing with the sand vipers and sent him flying. He died on the spot. Nye Tion's face darkened. He could tell that these sand vipers and giant sand vipers were fighting in coordination, so there must be someone controlling them from behind. Nye Tion flashed to Yao Fik's side and said in a low voice, "Master Yao, kill these giant sand vipers as soon as possible. There are more dangerous enemies waiting for us." "Okay." Yao Fik nodded. He had also noticed that someone was secretly controlling the giant sand viper's attack. 3,000 weak water. A feminine shout rang out. Immediately, a ball of turbid liquid turned into a large net, directly trapping 5 giant sand vipers. "This is my chance." Nye Tion saw that this was a golden opportunity. He roared and took the lead, slashing down with his sword. Sword chi surged out, and the shadow of the sword shocked the sky as it fell down. Boom! However, this sword strike hit the weak water net, and all the attack power was absorbed by the ball of liquid. Nye Tion frowned and looked at Tawny. She was the one who had used the water net to control the giant sand vipers. The giant sand viper's defense had clearly decreased in the water net, but it could still withstand Nye Tion's full-powered sword strike. It was obviously Tawny's doing. "Nye Tion City Lord, this strike is not enough. Another strike." Tawny's teasing voice sounded, but she was secretly laughing. "I finally absorbed some of his power. Unfortunately, it's still a little short to open the eye of the Scar of Dusk." "State Preceptor, you actually absorbed my power?" Nye Tion frowned, his eyes filled with anger and confusion. "Lend me some more power, and I'll help you kill this little snake." Tawny smiled calmly, tempting Nye Tion to attack again. "Okay." Nye Tion's blood was stimulated, and he slashed again. The sword's shadow was even bigger, but it was absorbed by Tawny's 3,000 weak water. What a strange primordial spirit! Nye Tion hastily retreated. Looking at Hu Xiaoli, his expression changed slightly. He was not stupid, and he was not going to fall for Tawny's trick. He attacked again because he wanted to see how scary his opponent's spirit was. He was surprised. Tawny's spirit should be a spirit, and it had a devouring element. It could even devour his sword air, which was too weird. Nye Tion didn't know what Hu Shaoli wanted to do by absorbing his power, but he vaguely guessed that the latter should be brewing some big scheme. Since Hu Shaoli was interested in Gu Wuyo's Scarlet Soul Red Lotus, it meant that she was also a member of the Devil Realm's Red Lotus clan. As a demon, It was strange that she was willing to be a preceptor of the great Chu Empire. Weak water extreme kill. Tawny giggled. She waved her arm, and a sword made of weak water broke through the air. It pierced the giant sand viper from head to tail. Chapter 469. What a terrifying power! Seeing this scene, Nie Tian was shocked. Not only was Little Li strong, but her methods were also cruel. She had directly blasted the giant sand viper into nothingness. On the other side, the other 4 giant sand vipers were also killed by the warriors. Their corpses fell into the group of snake. Damn it, we finally killed them. Seeing the giant sand viper dead, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone, return to the divine wheel space. Nie Tian roared. He looked ahead and saw a forest at the end of the sand dune. He was delighted. As long as they entered the forest, they would be able to get rid of the snake. Among the 40 true element warriors, a few died and a dozen were injured. The rest were fine. This kind of casualty was acceptable. We will be safe once we enter the forest. Seeing the forest in front of them, everyone was overjoyed. Elder Yi and the other Divine Wheel Realm warriors had been in the Divine Wheel space for a long time. They were sweating profusely and could not hold on any longer. Just when everyone was about to return to the Divine Wheel space, a strange voice suddenly sounded. You killed my baby viper and you still want to escape? A cold and stern voice sounded. A figure suddenly sprang out from the sand and leaped hundreds of meters into the air. With a hideous smile on his face, he looked down at everyone mercilessly. The moment they saw the figure clearly, everyone was shocked and asked, "What is this?" This figure was actually half human and half snake. The upper body was human, and the lower body was a snake's tail. It was covered in dark yellow armor and held a black snake spear in its hand. An expression of astonishment appeared on Nie Tian's face as he exclaimed, "Underground Nagas! And it is a snake man general!" Corpse Demon Lord added, "Human warriors, how dare you trespass on my race's forbidden land? Die!" The snake man general shouted angrily. With a thrust of his spear, dark clouds rolled up in all directions and a powerful aura came crashing down. Bang! The rolling dark clouds condensed into a giant palm and hit the invisible Divine Wheel barrier. With a muffled sound, the Divine Wheel space was directly broken. Too powerful. One hit, just one hit, and it directly broke the Divine Wheel space. Screams were heard. Many warriors fell into the group of snakes below. Disperse! The Naga general roared, and the sea of sand snakes on the ground receded like waves, burrowing into the ground and disappearing. The entire process happened in an instant, as if the sea of sand snakes had never appeared. Nie Tian looked at the Naga general and immediately knew that he was the one who had controlled the sand snakes and giant sand vipers to attack. Bang! 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 Then, countless figures broke out of the diagram. Hundreds of snake men appeared, holding black snake spears in their hands, surrounding all the martial artists. Nie Tian and the rest descended from the sky. All the warriors were surrounded by the serpent men. He discovered that each of these serpent men was actually at the true element realm. Dozens of them were even at the true element realm level 9. There were even a few who were at the spirit wheel realm. Mr. Yao, can you tell how strong that Naga general is? Nie Tian transmitted his voice to Yao Fik. Yao Fik nodded and replied, "He is at the 5th tier of the Divine Wheel." The 5th tier of the Divine Wheel. Nie Tian gasped. With this level of strength, even if Elder Yi and the rest were tied together, they would still not be a match for him, unless he could help Elder Yi remove the demon sealing curse. The Naga general, Sha Qianlang, floated down from the sky. He looked at the human warriors in front of him with a sinister gaze. Everyone who met his gaze lowered their heads. A cold, murderous aura enveloped the crowd. Everyone revealed a look of fear, and they did not know what to do next. Sha Qianlang swept his gaze across the crowd, and then looked at a young serpent man beside him. The latter was actually a female serpent man. She had delicate features and was much more beautiful than the average human girl. However, it was hard to say what her lower body was like. Sha Na, can you tell? Who is the person that Her Majesty is looking for? Sha Qianlang asked the woman beside him. The female serpent man named Sha Na kept sizing up the crowd. She swept her gaze across them one by one and then shook her head. Finally, her gaze landed on Nie Tian. Her vertical eyes lit up slightly and revealed a strange expression. She pointed at him and said, "General Qianlang, he is the master of the 9-star dragon vein." Nie Tian's heart sank slightly. He had vaguely sensed something just now. As expected, he had guessed correctly. These serpent men had come because the rising dragon kill formation had been destroyed. Just now, when Sha Qianlang said that Nie Tian and the rest had trespassed into their forbidden area, Nie Tian had already guessed that this forbidden area was most likely the rising dragon kill formation. At this moment, Nie Tian was really complaining incessantly. They had just entered the chaotic abyss and had already fallen into the rising dragon kill formation. They really did not want to trespass. Who the hell would be willing to trespass into a killing formation formed by the laws of heaven and earth for no reason? Sha Na, are you sure you didn't see wrongly? Sha Qianlong's gaze swept across Nie Tian. He pointed at Gu Qiulong, Qiu Shaofeng, Faceless Man, Gu Wuyo and the rest and said, "I think these people are more talented than that lad. It's impossible for him to have broken the rising dragon kill formation." Indeed, judging from their strength and age, Gu Qiulong and the rest were more powerful than Nie Tian. If the rising dragon kill formation was broken, it should be these people and not Nie Tian. General Qianlang, the spiritual serpent crystal that Her Majesty gave me shows that he is the master of the 9-star dragon vein. Sha Na pointed at Nie Tian. There was some suspicion in her eyes, but she obviously trusted the judgment of the spiritual serpent crystal more. "Did you really break the rising dragon kill formation?" Sha Qianlang nodded his head and sized up Nie Tian with his malicious eyes. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He didn't believe that a young lad with the strength of a level 4 giant soul could break the rising dragon kill formation. One must know that even their empress couldn't break the rising dragon kill formation. Could it be that this young lad's talent was even more terrifying than the Serpent Empress? "I broke the rising dragon kill formation. I am the master of the 9-star dragon vein that you are looking for." Nie Tian took a step forward. There was no fear in his eyes. At this moment, it was impossible for him to deny it even if he wanted to. He might as well admit it. "Good lad. Have some backbone." Sha Qianlang laughed coldly and shouted, "Do you know that the rising dragon kill formation is a forbidden area of my tribe? The 9-star dragon vein is a sacred item of my tribe. Not only did you break into the forbidden area, but you also obtained the 9-star dragon vein. Do you believe that I will kill you now?" Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and looked at Sha Qianlang. He said indifferently, "I don't believe you." "You don't believe me?" Sha Qianlang was slightly stunned. He instantly realized that he had lost his composure. He asked why. Nie Tian smiled and said, "You are only here to find me under the orders of the Serpent Empress. If you dared to kill me, you would have done it earlier. You wouldn't have to waste your time to find me. Since I'm already recognized as the 9-star dragon vein master by the Rising Dragon platform, I'm sure I have a special meaning to the Naga tribe. I don't think the Serpent Empress will kill me, right?" With these words, Nie Tian raised the corner of his eyebrows in a provocative manner. Sha Qianlang and Sha Na looked at each other and were stunned. They didn't expect a young lad to be so calm at this moment. Chapter 470. Yes, we are friends of Nie Tian City Lord. Seeing that Nie Tian calmed the Serpentine general down with just a few words, everyone shouted. At this moment, Diao Zhengde, Mo Feng, Qiu Wuhan, and the others looked at each other and nodded. They stood up and said, "General, we don't know Nie Tian. He is the person you are looking for and has nothing to do with us. Please let us go." "Let you go?" Sha Qianlong's venomous snake-like eyes swept across Diao Jingde's body as he sneered. You guys are also the ones who barged into the rising dragon killing array, and you even killed this general's baby viper. You've done so many things, yet you want to leave just like that? Diao Jingde was extremely shameless. He pointed at Yao Fik, Tawny, and the others and said, that big snake was killed by them. It has nothing to do with me. Diao Jingde's shamelessness had really reached a certain level. Everyone looked at him with extreme contempt. Master, this guy is really shameless to the extreme. We should really let him taste the 101 kinds of torture of our demon race. Corpse Luo Demon Monarch couldn't help but say, Idiot! Nie Tianling glanced at Diao Jingde coldly. The chaotic abyss was full of danger. If he left now, he would definitely die. The crowd looked at Diao Jingde with contempt. They were puzzled. How did this guy become the red-cloved elder of the Alchemist Guild? Mo Feng and Qiu Wuhan looked at each other. The former stepped forward and said, General, if we don't want to go with you, are you going to force us to leave? We have no less than 10 Spirit Wheel Realm martial artists and 50 True Element Realm martial artists here. If we were to really fight. What if we really fight? Hearing someone threatening him, Sha Qianlang didn't wait for the other party to finish speaking. He took a step forward and immediately released a majestic force. Bang! Mo Feng didn't even have the strength to resist and was directly hit until he vomited blood. You! Mo Feng stabilized his body. His pupils suddenly shrank as he stared at the serpentine general. His eyes were filled with fear. When the others saw that even the Mo clan's elder did not retaliate at all, they were filled with fear. When Sha Qianlang saw the reactions of the crowd, the mockery in his eyes deepened. He asked coldly, Is there anyone else who wants to leave? No one answered. No one dared to. The Serpent Man general before him was simply too powerful, and he could not afford to provoke her. Nie Tian glanced at Mo Feng with disdain. The latter is an idiot. He doesn't know Sha Qianlong's strength at all, yet he foolishly came forward to threaten Sha Qianlang. Isn't he looking for a beating? Nie Tian thought for a moment and said, General Qianlang, I really don't know many of the people here. If they want to leave, let them go. The crowd was stunned. They didn't expect Nie Tian to speak up for them. Sha Qianlang frowned slightly and laughed coldly. Brat, are you ordering me around? It's not an order. It's just a suggestion. Whether I say it or not is my business. Whether you listen or not is your business. Nie Tian smiled calmly. He looked at Sha Qianlang and said, Besides, they are of no use to you. Bringing them along will only be a burden, isn't it? Sha Qianlang stared at Nie Tian, wondering why he was so calm. Just as he was about to speak, Sha Anna, who was beside him, said, General Qianlang, Her Majesty only asked us to find the 9-star Dragon Vein Master. The others are not important. Why don't you let them go? No. Take them all away. Sha Qianlang suddenly roared. He seemed very angry. He wanted to let the others go, but he should be the one to take the initiative and not Nie Tian's request. If he let them go just because Nie Tian said so, he would lose face as a general. Nie Tian glanced at Sha Qianlang, and the corner of his mouth curled up. He already knew that Sha Qianlang wanted to let them go, so he purposely provoked him so that he could take everyone away. This was the chaotic abyss. It was impossible for any team to survive if they left this place. Even a spirit wheel expert would most likely perish here. Nie Tian saw that everyone came in together, so he couldn't bear to let them commit suicide. All right. We will listen to General Qianlang. Let's go. Don't let Her Majesty wait too long. Xiao Anna also seemed somewhat helpless. Her shrewd eyes swept over Nie Tian, feeling that she had fallen into this kid's trap. Sha Qianlang took out a black rhinoceros horn and blew it. The distant sound of the horn went deep into the ground. Immediately, a huge sailboat emerged from the ground and appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was stunned. They didn't know where the sailboat came from. Boom! The sealed sailboat opened. "Get on the sandboat," Sha Qianlang said coldly, and was the first to jump onto the sandboat. Nie Tian jumped onto the sandboat and everyone followed. After everyone had entered the sandboat, boom! The top of the sandboat closed up again. It was completely sealed, but the inside of the boat was brightly lit. It must have used some kind of light source. "Let's go." Sha Qianlang blew the horn again. The sand boat was pushed by an external force, and it began to sink into the sand dunes. "It's the sand snakes pushing the sand boat forward." Nie Tian heard the rustling sound outside the sand boat and immediately understood. The sand boat was pushed out from the ground by the sand snake. Now they were also pushing the sand boat forward. It had to be said that other than his strength, Sha Qianlong's ability to control the sand snakes was also terrifying. "Mr. Nie, these Nagas won't hurt us, right?" Elder Yi sent a telepathic message to Nie Tian. He sounded worried. "I don't think so. Let's wait until we meet the Empress." Nie Tian replied faintly, telling Elder Yi not to worry. He was also looking forward to seeing how the Empress of the Naga tribe looked like. The speed of the sand boat was very fast. The sound of sand breaking could be heard from inside the boat. After Nie Tian confirmed that Rui Qianyu was fine, he looked at the faceless man. The latter was also fine. He had the 9-yang constitution. As long as he could withstand the blood devour, the 9-yang blood qi would be able to suppress the blood devour. The blood devour was a disaster for others, but it was good for the 9-yang constitution. After the 9-yang blood qi completely refined the blood devour, the faceless man's strength would increase. The faceless man was currently in the true element stage 9. Once he refined the blood devour, he could easily break through to the spirit wheel realm. Nie Tian did not try to find out the faceless man's true identity. He knew that even if he asked, the faceless man would not tell him. In fact, the faceless man and Rui Qianyu did not have much interaction. At most, they would look at each other without saying a word. At this time, Nie Tian walked to Xiao Anna and asked cautiously, "Miss, can you let me see the spirit snake crystal that you mentioned just now?" "No." Xiao Anna rejected decisively and said, "The spirit snake crystal belongs to the Empress. Without her permission, I can't show it to outsiders." Nie Tian smiled and said, "I'm already the owner of the 9-star dragon vein. I'm not considered an outsider." "Huh." Xiao Anna hesitated for a moment but still said, "Whether the owner of the 9-star dragon vein is an outsider or not, it's up to the Empress to decide." Nie Tian was speechless. This little girl only had eyes for the Empress. She was very loyal. Chapter 471. Walala. The sand boat stopped and began to rise. The sound of sand being flipped could be heard, and the sand boat broke through the sand. Boom! The upper deck of the sand boat opened, and a majestic ancient city appeared in front of everyone. The ancient city in front of them was much taller than a human city, and it was very layered. All of it was built with huge stones that were dozens of meters tall. At first glance, it was so majestic that it made people want to worship it. It was hard to imagine how such a grand ancient city was built. Whoosh! The moment the sand boat opened, a snake spear suddenly pierced towards Sha Qianlang. Bang! Sha Qianlang reached out and grabbed the snake spear. He exerted force and broke it. He shouted, "Lunatic Sha, what are you doing?" The person who attacked Sha Qianlang was a huge man from the Naga race. Even though his lower body was that of a snake, he was still close to 3 meters tall when he stood up. He was almost twice the height of an ordinary Naga. This guy had a triangular head, and his face looked like it was half human and half snake, as if he had not fully evolved. There was a chain around his neck, and there were all kinds of skulls on it. Some belonged to humans, and some belonged to spiritual beasts. The guy who was called Lunatic Sha smiled at Sha Qianlang and said, "General Qianlang, long time no see. I wanted to test your strength." "Ridiculous. Sha Qianlang shouted angrily. You think you are qualified to test my strength? If it wasn't for your father, I would have killed you right now. General Qianlang, you are exaggerating. I mean no harm. Sha Ana quickly stepped forward to persuade him, and signaled for him to stop talking. Lunatic Sha was sensible. He looked at the other people in the sand boat and shouted, Who is the 9-star dragon vein master? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect the 9-star dragon vein master to be so famous among the Naga race. He jumped out of the sand boat and stepped forward. He said, I am. Sha Qianlang saw that Nie Tian had left and quickly followed him. He was nervous, as if he was protecting Nie Tian, afraid that Lunatic Sha would do something out of line. Lunatic Sha was famous among the Naga race. It would be bad if he hurt Nie Tian, the 9-star dragon vein master. You're the master of the 9-star dragon vein? Madman Sha chuckled, but in the next instant, killing intent suddenly flashed in his eyes as he roared furiously, I don't believe it! Bang! As soon as his roar resounded, Madman Sha's piercingly cold palm slapped out towards Nie Tian's face. The whistling sound of the wind blew past his ears, and a surging killing intent assaulted his face. Nie Tian's pupils suddenly constricted. He didn't expect this person to directly attack. By the time he wanted to act again, it was already too late. At the critical moment, Sha Qianlang opened the space of his divine wheel and protected Nie Tian. Madman Sha's attack landed on the space of his divine wheel and did not cause any damage. Lunatic Sha, are you crazy? Sha Qianlang was prepared for this. He looked at Lunatic Sha, who had a playful look on his face, and roared angrily. Nie Tian was the person the Empress wanted to see. Moreover, the 9-star dragon vein was a sacred item of the Naga race. It was extremely important to the Naga race. If something really happened, even 10 heads of Sha Qianlang wouldn't be enough to compensate. Madman Sha actually ignored Sha Qianlang. He shook his triangular head and revealed a stiff smile. However, it was full of mockery. He sneered and said, The master of the 9-star dragon vein only has this much strength? What's the point of hiding under someone else's protection? If you have the guts, then fight with me, Lunatic Sha. What an arrogant fellow. When Nie Tian heard what Lunatic Sha said, his eyes narrowed slightly. This fellow had the strength of the 9th tier of true energy, while Nie Tian only had the strength of a 4th tier giant spiritual. With such a difference in strength, no matter how much guts he had, he wouldn't be able to fight with him. Lunatic Sha stared at Nie Tian and smiled again. He said, You must think that I am bullying you. How about this, I will suppress my strength to the 4th tier giant spiritual. If we fight, it won't be considered bullying, right? Not interested. Nie Tianling replied coldly. If Lunatic Sha suppressed his strength to the 4th tier giant spiritual, he was confident that he could kill him in one move. However, this was meaningless. According to Sha Qianlang, Lunatic Sha had a father behind him. It seemed that even Sha Qianlang couldn't afford to offend him. Nie Tian didn't want to provoke a powerful enemy for no reason. There were so many idiots in the world. If he saw one and taught one a lesson, it would really be tiring. Brat, whether or not I am interested is not up to you to decide. Lunatic Sha sensed Nie Tian's disdain. He roared and actually wanted to attack. Lunatic Sha, are you done? Do you think I don't exist? Sha Qianlang was furious. His divine wheel space forced Lunatic Sha back a few meters. He said in a deep voice, If you dare to come forward again, I will kill you. Sha Qianlang had already sensed that there were several human experts behind Nie Tian, who were itching for a fight. If they started a war between the human race and the Naga tribe before meeting the Empress, it would be a dereliction of duty. Brat, consider yourself lucky. Lunatic Sha didn't dare to go forward again. He threatened and left angrily. Let's go. Sha Qianlang didn't care about him. He led Nie Tian and the rest into the Naga city. The Naga city was bustling. It was no different from a human city. Looking over, there were wine shops, tea houses, and department stores on both sides of the street. Look, it's humans. The appearance of Nyetian and the rest caused a commotion. The Naga tribe looked at them with surprise and curiosity. They pointed at them and commented on them. Nyetian laughed bitterly. In the Naga city, they had become monsters. After a while, Sha Qianlang brought Nyetian and the rest to the palace of the Naga tribe. The palace of the Naga tribe was much larger than the palaces of the humans. Not only could it not be compared to the palaces in the 3,000 small worlds, but even the various shrines in the heaven realm were inferior. Just the gate of the palace was hundreds of meters tall. It looked spectacular. Walking below it, one could feel how small they were. Soon, Nyetian and the rest entered the palace and arrived at the main hall. Her Majesty is in the main hall. Only you can enter. Sha Qianlang stopped everyone in front of the main hall. He only allowed Nyetian to enter. No way. Elder Yi was the first to object. He was very decisive. Take a good look at where you are. It's not up to you to decide. Sha Qianlang replied coldly. There was no room for discussion. At this time, Xiao Anna's expression suddenly changed. She immediately said, General Qianlang, Her Majesty wants to meet this old man. Sha Qianlang was stunned. His face darkened and he nodded unwillingly. Nyetian and Elder Yi followed behind Xiao Anna and entered the main hall. In the main hall, a graceful lady was sitting. She wore a crown on her head. She looked very dignified. A faint smile hung on the corner of her mouth, giving off a peaceful and approachable feeling. Her eyes were deep and unwavering, like the deepest ocean, boundless and limitless. The armored warriors on both sides of the main hall lowered their heads. They did not dare to look at the lady in the main hall. Chapter 472. Master! Corpse King's voice sounded, and Nyetian woke up as if he was in a dream. His face was pale, and his heart was filled with horror. This woman was too scary. Just a glance was enough to make him fall into an illusion. This illusion realm seemed to be even scarier than the Deputy City Lord of Chaos City, Wan Qirong. 9-star Dragon Vein Master, you are finally here. The woman in the hall revealed a smile that could topple cities on her exquisite face. Her voice seemed to have a strong magical power that was very enjoyable, making people want to sink into this magical voice forever. Without a doubt, the woman in front of him was the Queen of the Nagas, Medusa. Nyetian bowed slightly and said, Greetings, Your Majesty. No need to stand on ceremony. Please take a seat. Queen Medusa smiled faintly, appearing to be approachable. This was a very charming woman. Every frown and smile showed nobility, and at the same time, there was no indifference that kept people 1,000 miles away. It was very rare. Nyetian and Elder Yi sat down carefully. At this time, Xiana walked over and handed a colorful crystal ball to Queen Medusa. The latter glanced at the crystal ball, smiled faintly, and said, You are Nyetian? Nyetian nodded and thought to himself, That must be the spirit serpent crystal. It seems like it has the ability to record images. Queen Medusa learned my name from the images recorded by the spirit serpent crystal. Queen Medusa's beautiful eyes flashed, and she suddenly stood up. She walked lightly and slowly to Nyetian's side. At this time, Nyetian was shocked to find that the lower half of Queen Medusa's body was not a snake's body, but 2 legs like a human's. She looked no different from a human, and she was much more beautiful than most humans. Looking at Queen Medusa at a close distance, her beauty was simply breathtaking. Her exquisite face was like a lotus flower coming out of the water, and her skin was as tender as a young girl's. It made people want to pounce on her and bite her a few hundred times. It was hard to imagine that this was a Naga. Nyetian had once heard that the experts of the Naga race could form a human body after reaching the heavenly evolution realm. Therefore, he guessed that Empress Medusa's strength should be at the heavenly evolution realm, and she had already formed a human body. Nye Tian. Empress Medusa lightly opened her fragrant lips. She was less than a meter away from Nye Tian. A strange fragrance filled the air, causing one's mind to be stirred. Nye Tian felt his heart tremble. He was so nervous that beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He didn't dare to look into his opponent's eyes again. His opponent was far stronger than him. Queen Medusa's eyes were a deep azure blue, like the deep green sea. Just one look would cause one to turn to stone. She smiled elegantly and said, "You don't have to be nervous. This Empress just wants to see what's so special about someone who can break the rising dragon killing formation." Nye Tian took a deep breath and forced a smile. "Have you noticed the difference, Your Majesty?" "Yes." Empress Medusa nodded with a smile and said, "There's a power in your body that makes this Empress wary. The power of the stars." It wasn't strange that Empress Medusa could sense the power of the stars in Nye Tian's body. However, she said it so bluntly, which made Nye Tian feel a little strange. After calming down, Nye Tian didn't want to waste any more time. He said directly, "Your Majesty, I broke the rising dragon killing formation and obtained the 9-star dragon vein. What do you want to do with me?" Empress Medusa smiled and said, "I want you to do me a favor." "A favor?" Nye Tian was slightly stunned and his heart sank. He knew that the Empress Medusa, who seemed amiable on the surface, was definitely not that simple. Empress Medusa's favor was definitely not a small matter. Nye Tian was puzzled. What was it that even Empress Medusa couldn't do and still needed his help? "Yes." Empress Medusa smiled faintly, and her gaze suddenly landed on Elder Yi. She said, "If you help this Empress will remove the demon sealing curse for him." Elder Yi and Nye Tian were stunned at the same time. They didn't expect Empress Medusa to know about the demon sealing curse. Elder Yi was a little excited. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. Nye Tian signaled Elder Yi to calm down. He wanted to see what Empress Medusa would offer first. Empress Medusa saw that Nye Tian was interested, but she smiled and said, "But before that, this Empress needs to see your strength." "As you wish." Nye Tian nodded. He had already expected this. A moment later, Empress Medusa brought Nye Tian and Elder Yi to a huge plaza. Blood Death Field? The plaza in front of him reminded Nye Tian of the Great Chu Heavenly Prison's Blood Death Field. The circular plaza was surrounded by huge iron bars. There were also armored warriors guarding it. Each warrior's strength was above the 5th level of true element. Pa, pa. Empress Medusa clapped her hands twice. Then, a figure fell from the sky and landed heavily on the plaza, raising a cloud of dust. Madman Shah. Seeing the figure appear on the plaza, Nye Tian's face slightly darkened. "Nye Tian, you've already met him, haven't you? I won't introduce him to you." Queen Medusa smiled, looking harmless. Nye Tian frowned and complained in his heart. Empress Medusa wouldn't use Madman Shah to test him, right? This guy was a 9th-level true element martial artist. Empress Medusa saw Nye Tian's worry and smiled. "Don't worry. This Empress has suppressed his strength by an entire realm. This way, you won't be at a disadvantage." "That's good." Nye Tian took a deep breath. With the suppression of an entire realm, Madman Shah's strength was only at the 9th level of Giant Spirit. In front of Nye Tian, he could only be beaten. "Your Majesty, I didn't hold back. If I hurt him, will there be any trouble?" Nye Tian suddenly asked with a strange smile. Queen Medusa was taken aback at first, but then she smiled and said, "Nye Tian, you're underestimating Sha Feng. He's a genius of our clan. Even if his strength is suppressed by a major realm, he's still far stronger than you. It's not wise to underestimate your opponent." "Sha Feng, Madman Shah's name. Smelly brat, you talk big. Let's fight life or death." Hearing Nye Tian's words, Sha Feng roared in anger. Being looked down upon by a human martial artist, Sha Feng couldn't bear it. "Okay." Nye Tian smiled faintly. His figure flashed and landed in front of Sha Feng. The surrounding serpent men warriors looked at Nie Tian with disdain. Madman Sha was infamous in the serpent men tribe. Nie Tian was just a mere 4th-level giant spirit. It was impossible for him to be Madman Sha's opponent. Smelly brat, you had Sha Qianlang protecting you just now. Let's see who else can help you now. Sha Feng's eyes flashed with murderous intent. He couldn't wait to tear Nie Tian apart. Fool! Nie Tianling spat out these 2 words. He had already made up his mind to end the battle in one move. He knew that Madman Sha was just a way for Medusa to test his strength. The stronger he showed, the more importance Medusa would place on him. This would be very helpful in the upcoming negotiations. You're courting death. Sha Feng was enraged. His black snake spear pierced through the air, condensing into a giant phantom spearhead in the air, pressing down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian immediately felt a gust of wind blowing against his face. The corner of his mouth curled up. He ignored it and stabbed out with his sword. Chapter 473. Sha Feng spat out a mouthful of blood. His body drew a perfect arc in the air before crashing heavily onto the ground. Amidst the bloody light, Nie Tian did not stop at all. With a light tap of his toes, his figure moved, and he directly left. He appeared next to Queen Medusa as if nothing had happened. Everyone was petrified, and the atmosphere was dead silent. No one had expected Nie Tian's sword to be so powerful. One sword. Just one sword was enough to completely defeat Sha Feng. In the Naga tribe, Sha Feng was not only a lunatic but also a genius. He was already at the 9th level of true element before the age of 30. Even if his strength was suppressed by Queen Medusa to the 9th level of giant soul, he was still much stronger than Nie Tian, who was only at the 4th level of giant soul. Even so, he still could not withstand Nie Tian's sword. The master of the 9-star dragon vein is indeed extraordinary. After a while, Queen Medusa's expression eased up, and she forced a smile. Nie Tian could tell that the smile on her face was very unnatural. Nie Tian wanted to shock his opponent with this sword, and the effect was not bad. He could see it from Queen Medusa's stiff expression. What terrifying strength! A Naga martial artist exclaimed. At this time, everyone finally reacted. Impossible! After a while, Sha Feng's angry roar resounded in the square. He looked at Nie Tian with bloodshot eyes, as if he wanted to continue fighting. However, when he noticed Queen Medusa beside him, his aura immediately dissipated. In the Naga tribe, Sha Feng was not afraid of anyone, but he definitely did not dare to be arrogant in front of Queen Medusa. Your Majesty, are you satisfied with our performance? Nie Tian smiled playfully and secretly glanced at Queen Medusa. Empress Medusa regained her gentle and noble demeanor. She sent a voice transmission to Nie Tian. I didn't expect you to be a sword heart swordsman, and your sword chi seems to contain 2 types of power. Although these 2 types of power are fused together, they can still be separated. If I'm not mistaken, you are a dual sword heart swordsman. This time, it was Nie Tian's turn to be stunned. Dual sword heart, this was one of his secrets. Although Nie Tian had used sword chi in front of many people so far, Queen Medusa was the first one who could see that he had dual sword heart. Thinking back to how he had fallen into an illusion with just a single glance, Nie Tian felt much more at ease. Since Queen Medusa was a master of illusion, it was understandable that her perception was different from ordinary people. Your Majesty, please keep this a secret for me. Nie Tian said sincerely. Dual sword heart, this was a legendary swordsman. If people knew about this, Nie Tian would definitely become the target of public criticism. Therefore, it was better to keep this matter a secret. Empress Medusa nodded slightly. She had transmitted her voice to Nie Tian to keep the secret for him. After leaving the square, Queen Medusa arranged for Nie Tian and the other warriors to stay in the palace and allowed the other warriors to leave. The people from the Mo family, the Chiu family, the Alchemists Guild, and many other teams chose to leave. The people from the Tang family, the Gu family, the Martial Arts Merchant Union, the people from the Great Chu Empire, and the people from Chaos City chose to stay. Half of them left, and the other half stayed. In the next 3 days, Nie Tian and the others had been resting. The injured warriors had basically recovered from their injuries, and the others also seized the time to cultivate. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the chaos abyss was dozens of times richer than the outside world. Cultivating here for a day was equivalent to cultivating for half a month in the outside world. Nie Tian was not in a hurry and waited for Queen Medusa to find him. After half a day, Queen Medusa's personal guard, Xiao Anna, appeared and brought Nie Tian and Elder Yi to a secret place in the palace. The three of them came to a secret room. Xiao Anna gestured for Nie Tian to enter, but stopped Elder Yi and said, "Her Majesty will only let Lord Nie Tian enter alone. You and I can wait outside." Elder Yi nodded solemnly. Nie Tian entered the secret room and saw Queen Medusa again. At this time, Queen Medusa had taken off her phoenix crown and robe and changed into a green dress. However, her beauty did not dim because of this. Instead, she seemed more amiable and had a fresh temperament that smelled like orchids. "Mr. Nie Tian, please take a seat." Empress Medusa smiled elegantly. Her every move revealed a unique charm that made it impossible for people to refuse her every word. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "Your Majesty, there are no outsiders here. If you have something to say, please say it." Queen Medusa nodded slightly. The smile on her exquisite face disappeared and was replaced with a pained expression. She said, "Mr. Nie Tian is a smart person, so this Empress will not keep you in suspense. You human martial artists come to the chaotic abyss with the intention of training and searching for treasures in the abyss. However, the vastness of the chaotic abyss is far beyond your imagination. Even the small Sumer world that you live in is not even a third of the size of the chaotic abyss. So big." Nie Tian sucked in a breath of cold air. Although he already knew that the chaotic abyss was very big, he did not expect it to be this big. Although the 3,000 small worlds were only lower worlds, they still had a radius of more than 100,000 miles. The chaotic abyss was only an independent space-time left behind from the ancient war between gods and demons. It was already several times larger than the 3,000 small worlds. It was hard to imagine what kind of vast world the ancient martial artists lived in. Queen Medusa continued, "Although there are treasures passed down from ancient times in the chaotic abyss, it is impossible for you human martial artists to find them." Nie Tian nodded silently. The chaotic abyss was too big. Trying to find treasures here was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The chances were slim. "Your Majesty, if you have something to say, please say it," Nie Tian said, seeing that Queen Medusa had not finished speaking. Queen Medusa glanced at Nie Tian with her beautiful eyes and said, "This Empress knows of a secret territory with many ancient treasures. I can guide you there." Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Does your Majesty think I am a 3-year-old child? If there really is such a secret territory, why don't you go there yourself? Why guide us?" Queen Medusa already knew that Nie Tian would ask such a question. She was not angry and said, "That secret territory is the place where an ancient demon saint fell. There is a restriction set up specifically to deal with the demon race. This Empress and other demon race members cannot enter. Only human martial artists can enter." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He gathered his courage and stared at Queen Medusa. He wanted to determine if the latter was lying. Queen Medusa looked at Nie Tian with her beautiful eyes. She did not avoid his gaze. Nie Tian was sure that she was not lying and said, "Your Majesty, there is no free lunch in this world. You must have a request for guiding us into the demon saint's secret territory. Tell us your conditions." Queen Medusa's beautiful eyes flashed with a look of pain, but she did not speak. Instead, she took off her clothes. Nie Tian was shocked. He did not understand why the latter was taking off her clothes and quickly moved away. Mr. Nyetian, look at my body and you will know. Queen Medusa's voice sounded. Nyetian had no choice but to turn around. Chapter 474. The moment Nyetian saw Empress Medusa's body, he was stunned. What appeared in front of him was indeed Empress Medusa's naked body. However, it was not the perfect body that he had imagined, but a broken body covered with cuts and bruises. Her sparkling and translucent skin was no different from that of a human girl, but it was covered with countless terrifying cracks and holes. Every crack was so glaring, and her skin and flesh were all twisted up, completely destroying a perfect body. What surprised Nyetian even more was that the wounds on the body actually emitted a very bloody evil aura. The evil aura seemed to seal some kind of terrifying power. After a while, Queen Medusa passed him a picture, and her beauty was restored. She said, "Mr. Nyetian, as you can see, I am now at the end of my life, and I may die at any time." "I understand." Nyetian suddenly understood something and said, "The chaotic abyss was opened by the Empress, right?" He had heard that the chaotic abyss opened at random times, but every time it opened, it would basically be 100 years apart. However, this time, it had only been a dozen years since the last time it opened. Clearly, it had opened early. Yes. Empress Medusa nodded lightly and did not deny it. Nyetian immediately understood. He smiled coldly and said, "Then, as soon as we entered the chaotic abyss, we directly came to the rising dragon kill formation. This must have been arranged by Her Majesty." Empress Medusa nodded silently and said, "This Empress only wants to find someone who can break the rising dragon kill formation and enter the demon saint's secret realm. And Mr. Nyetian, you are the person this Empress is looking for." Nyetian was silent. Empress Medusa's method of finding people was really strange. If it were not for Nyetian, it was estimated that 200 to 300 martial artists would have died in the rising dragon kill formation. And with Empress Medusa's temperament, she definitely would not close the chaotic abyss. This way, there would be a continuous stream of human martial artists entering the chaotic abyss and entering the rising dragon kill formation until the person who could break the rising dragon kill formation appeared. It had to be said that Empress Medusa was really ruthless. The rising dragon kill formation was a big trap to kill human martial artists. If it were not for Nyetian being the first to enter, who knew how many human martial artists would have died in the rising dragon kill formation? So that's it. Nyetian understood this and looked at Empress Medusa with more caution. "Your Majesty, what do you want me to do, please?" Since the matter had been made clear, Nyetian was no longer polite and said directly, "You have seen that the spiritual seal in my body is acting up. If I do not receive treatment now, I will be." Empress Medusa squeezed out a touch of sadness on her face and said, "The 9-star dragon vein could have saved my life, but I couldn't break the rising dragon killing formation. You've broken through the rising dragon killing formation and become the 9-star dragon vein master acknowledged by the rising dragon platform. It shouldn't be too much to ask you to help me, right?" Nyetian was stunned and thought to himself, "You snake spirit, could it be that you want to eat me?" The 9-star dragon vein had already fused with Nyetian's body. Even if Queen Medusa ate him alive, she wouldn't be able to save his life. Although he didn't know what the spiritualized seal was, Nyetian could tell that it was definitely something that could kill Queen Medusa. Empress Medusa did not explain too much. Instead, she said, "I know that there is a herb called the 9-revolution spirit ginseng in the demon saint mystic realm. It can suppress the spiritualized fiend seal, so I need you to enter the demon saint mystic realm and get me the 9-revolution spirit ginseng." "Your Majesty, the sacred beast realm must be extremely dangerous, right?" Presumably, the number of human warriors who had fallen there was uncountable. "Do you really think that with my strength, I'll be able to come out alive after entering the secret territory?" Nie Tian smiled faintly and said playfully. The Chaos Abyss was already extremely dangerous, and the sacred beast realm was even more unpredictable. If he were to foolishly work for Empress Medusa, it would be too easy for the latter. What do you want? Just say it. Since both sides had made everything clear, there was no need to waste any more time. Empress Medusa said directly. First, the demon sealing curse on the person outside the secret chamber should be handed over to your majesty. That's not too much, right? Nie Tian smiled faintly. He was best at demanding an exorbitant price. No problem. Empress Medusa agreed without hesitation. Since she could recognize the demon sealing curse on Elder Yi, there must be a way to remove it. Second, everything in the sacred beast realm, apart from the destiny spirit ginseng, belongs to me. Nie Tian continued. Of course. Empress Medusa agreed immediately. Is there a third condition? Of course. Nie Tian laughed and said, Third, I want to freely enter and exit the Chaos Abyss without being restricted by whether it's open or not. This. Empress Medusa hesitated when she heard Nie Tian's request. She thought for a moment and said, I can tell you a space-time crack that's permanently open in the Chaos Abyss, but you have to promise that only you can enter and exit it. You can't tell anyone else. Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, Dear Your Majesty, I can't promise that. Empress Medusa was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect Nie Tian to be so difficult to deal with. She immediately took a step back and said, The Chaos Abyss is an isolated world. If a large number of human warriors are allowed to enter, it will definitely arouse the opposition of other demons. I can promise that I won't bring a large number of warriors into the Chaos Abyss. Before Empress Medusa could finish speaking, Nie Tian interrupted her and said, Good. Empress Medusa stared at Nie Tian for a moment and finally nodded. I agree to these 3 conditions. Your Majesty, don't be anxious. I haven't finished saying my conditions. Nie Tian smiled faintly with a satisfied expression. You still have conditions? Empress Medusa was a little speechless. Her noble temperament was a little messed up, but she still calmed down and said, Continue. Nie Tian rolled his eyes twice and said, I haven't thought about it yet, but Your Majesty, you must remember that you still owe me a condition. Empress Medusa's expression was stiff. It was the first time she saw a human warrior being so greedy. All right, Your Majesty, don't be so angry. When are we leaving? Nie Tian smiled faintly with the attitude of a winner. The snake spirit in front of her almost killed Nie Tian and the others. It wouldn't be too much to let her be angry for a while. Spirit ginseng of destiny. Empress Medusa's expression softened slightly. She whispered softly and opened her palm. A colorful light gushed out and condensed into a colorful flower in her palm. This is the spirit ginseng of destiny. Remember what it looks like. Empress Medusa looked at Nie Tian with a dignified expression. When the latter nodded, she dispersed the phantom in her palm and said, The demon saint's secret territory is extremely dangerous. Countless human warriors have entered before, but no one has come out alive. I hope you can create a miracle this time. Chapter 475. The next day, Nie Tian and all the human warriors left the ancient city on a sand boat. Empress Medusa trusted him and allowed all the martial artists to leave. Nie Tian told all the warriors about the demonic saint's secret territory, only hiding the fact that he was going to enter the secret territory to obtain the destiny spirit ginseng for Queen Medusa. All the warriors who didn't want to stay in the chaotic abyss were sent away by Queen Medusa. The others expressed their willingness to enter the demonic saint's secret territory with Nie Tian. Although the demonic saint's secret territory was extremely dangerous, the ancient treasures inside were even more tempting. Queen Medusa even revealed that there was an ancient inheritance of the demonic saint in the secret territory. The inheritance of the demonic saint was definitely something that everyone would go crazy over. Half a day later, the sand boat reached the edge of the desert. Lord Nyetian, the place in front of us is called the Destiny Nether Woods. The Demon Saint's arcane realm is in there. Sha Qianlong's attitude towards Nyetian was filled with respect as he pointed at the woods in front of them. What a powerful restriction! Even before entering the Destiny Dark Forest, Nyetian had already sensed a powerful restrictive aura blowing towards him. It seemed to have the effect of suppressing a martial practitioner's strength, which was very similar to the restrictive aura he had sensed in the Burial Cloud Abyss. Nyetian City Lord, the forest ahead is a bit strange. It seems to have a suppressive force on a 5th-level true element realm martial artist. Yao Fei's mental power was far above Nyetian's, so he said after feeling the strong restriction aura. Sha Qianlang said, Lord Nyetian, the Destiny Woods does not allow the Naga tribe to enter. We will wait for you here. All right, Nyetian answered. Then, he led all the human cultivators out of the sand boat and into the Destiny Dark Forest. In the woods, the light was dim and the air was thick, making it difficult to breathe. After entering, everyone felt a cold and gloomy aura coming towards them. The surrounding trees were tall and dark, like the guards of the woods, calm and gloomy. Nyetian spread out the map of the secret territory given to him by Queen Medusa and confirmed a route. After another half a day, everyone arrived at a dark canyon in the woods. The sky was filled with dark clouds that seemed to swallow people whole. Why is this a graveyard? Upon entering the dark valley, Nyetian found himself in front of a graveyard, which puzzled him. According to the markings on the map, this should be the location of the secret land. With doubts in his mind, Nyetian flashed into the cemetery and arrived in front of the tallest tombstone in the center of the cemetery. 4 words were engraved on it: Fated Demon Saint. It's here. Nyetian raised his hand, and a wisp of weak flame appeared in his palm, which he drew directly from the tombstone. Everyone was stunned when they saw the flame in Nyetian's hand. Nyetian laughed and thought to himself, it seems that my luck is not bad. There is actually an earth demonic flame hidden under this tombstone. The earth core demonic flame was the 17th demonic flame on the demonic flame list. Although it was not the best demonic flame, and it was impossible for it to be the true form of the demonic flame, it was already good to encounter a wisp of it. With the geocentric demonic flame, Nyetian's trip was not in vain. His gaze swept across the tombstones in front of him. Could it be that there were treasures under all the tombstones? If that was the case, he would really be rich. Suddenly, Nyetian saw Tawny. On her face that was hidden under the veil, there seemed to be something red flashing between her eyebrows. He was puzzled. Tawny should be a member of the Red Lotus race in the Devil World. How could she enter the Destiny Forest? The Destiny Forest had restrictions on all demons, forbidding them from entering. Gu Wuyo was able to enter because of her human bloodline, but why could Tawny enter as well? Is she not a member of the Red Lotus tribe? Nyetian suspected for a moment, but immediately gave up. Now was not the time to think about what kind of person Tawny was. Bang! Suddenly, there was a loud noise in the distance. A tombstone actually flew into the air. It was forcibly blown up by the power of the ground, and then hung in midair. Everyone looked over, and a strange scene appeared. The soil on the ground turned over, and a pair of withered and pale hands came out. The atmosphere became gloomy, and a chilling aura enveloped the surroundings. Bang! 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 Then, more tombstones flew up and hung in the air. Countless withered and pale hands appeared on the ground, and a strong and pungent smell of corpses spread out. Soon, countless mummies came out of the ground. A pair of hands supported the ground, and their shriveled skull-like heads lifted up. Their entire bodies immediately stood up. At a glance, the entire graveyard in the canyon was filled with mummies that had just crawled out of the ground. This scene was very horrifying. Even those with a strong mind couldn't help but be frightened. Bang! Someone couldn't help but attack the mummies. With one palm, one of the mummies was directly smashed into pieces. He couldn't help but laugh wildly. Everyone, don't be nervous. These mummies have no fighting power at all. Let's attack together and destroy these mummies. Seeing this, the crowd relaxed a lot, but the next moment, their smiling expressions stiffened. In the air, the corpse that was smashed into pieces turned into a ball of corpse chi. Then, it condensed back into a human form. Then, a cold smile appeared on the corner of its mouth. Its figure floated in the air, like a ghost or a demon. It was hard to catch. Ah! An incomparably shrill scream was heard. When the person attacked, the blood vessels in his body suddenly collapsed, and his entire body suddenly exploded, turning into a ball of blood in the air. And the mummies that attacked him actually absorbed his blood chi and yuan chi. Gradually, the shriveled face swelled up, and a trace of blood appeared, and it became more like a human shape. Ah! Immediately, miserable screams sounded one after another, echoing in the graveyard, adding to the eerie coldness. The mummies seemed to have gone crazy, and they attacked the martial artists like shadows. Those martial artists who were attacked all exploded and died. In the blink of an eye, many of the mummies began to take human shape, and the corners of their mouths curved up into cold smiles. Blood sacrifice soul rebirth technique. In the chaotic original coffin, the corpse demon king's trembling voice sounded. What technique is this? The corpse demon king was from the demon world, so it was not surprising that he knew this kind of evil technique, and Nie Tian quickly asked. The corpse demon king said, Master, this is a kind of soul rebirth technique of the demon world, and it is one of the demon world's 7 great forbidden techniques. Even I can't use it. These mummies use the martial artists' blood chi and yuan chi to restore their souls and bodies. Restore their souls and bodies. Nie Tian sucked in a breath of cold air. Isn't that a technique that can bring the dead back to life and reverse life and death? These mummies are definitely martial artists from the ancient times, and who knows how strong they are. If they really come back to life, Nie Tian and the others will definitely not be able to leave this place alive. Swords warp. At this moment, a familiar voice resounded. Nie Tian followed the voice, and sure enough, it was the Ling Xian Tian Pavilion's assassin, Wen Hao.